Chapter 1. The Bottom of the Ladder. The ancient civilizations of the galaxy spoke of a time, before stars burned in the endless dark, before worlds turned around their suns, before the first oceans formed, before the first creatures crawled beneath alien skies, before even the galaxies themselves spun into being. There was only the first silence. And in that silence there were two powers: light and darkness. Not light as mortals understood it. Not the glow of a star, or the fire of a sun, or the pale shine of moons across sleeping oceans. This was the first light, pure and endless, the breath of creation itself. It was warmth before warmth had a name. It was hope before there were hearts to hold it. It was order, possibility, life, and song. And against it stood the darkness. Not simple shadow. Not the harmless absence of day. This was the first darkness, ancient and hungry, cold beyond death, empty beyond silence. It was not content to exist. It wished to consume. Where the light gave shape, the darkness unraveled. Where the light sang, the darkness swallowed the sound. Where the light reached outward, the darkness closed around it like a fist. So began the first war. No living mind could truly imagine it. The elder races tried. They carved the story into crystal temples, sang it in gravity hymns, painted it across asteroid shrines and memory moons. Yet every telling failed, because the battle had been larger than thought itself. The light struck across the void in waves of creation, and where it passed, sparks of existence ignited like embers in endless night. The darkness answered with storms of nothingness, tearing at those sparks before they could become real. The two powers clashed without armies, without weapons, without voices, and yet the universe trembled from their conflict. For ages beyond counting, neither could overcome the other. The darkness smothered whole fields of newborn light. The light burned pathways through endless shadow. Reality bent beneath them. Time flickered. Space stretched and shattered. In places where their war was fiercest, the bones of existence cracked open, and from those wounds came the first fires. The first stars. The darkness recoiled from them. The light pressed forward. One by one, the fires multiplied. Points of brightness became rivers. Rivers became storms. Storms became spirals. The darkness fought to devour them, but the light grew stronger with every flame it awakened. At last, the light gathered itself into one final radiance. It surged across the newborn universe, not destroying the darkness but driving it back, farther, deeper, beyond the reach of the first stars, into the cold places between creation and oblivion. And from the wake of that victory came the galaxies, great shining wheels of fire and dust, vast islands of stars adrift in the endless sea. Some were massive beyond comprehension, blazing with trillions of suns. Some were ancient red giants, slow and dying. Others were young and wild, full of blue fire and newborn worlds. Among them was one galaxy, a modest spiral, neither the largest nor the brightest, turning quietly in a forgotten stretch of the universe. The Milky Way. To the great civilizations of existence, it was not remarkable. It was one galaxy among countless others, ordinary in shape, ordinary in size, ordinary in destiny. But within that small galaxy, life had awakened. And life, as it always did, began to climb. Across the Milky Way, civilizations rose beneath 1,000 alien suns. Some were ancient, so old they had watched their first stars dim and had moved their worlds to younger systems. Some were brilliant and brief, burning through knowledge like fire through dry grass. Others were patient, slow, and enduring, building empires across nebulae while shorter-lived species were still discovering metal. At the top of the galactic ladder stood the great powers. The Vayer Dominion was one of them, an empire of towering crystalline beings who had mastered energy architecture and could grow cities from starlight. Their ships moved like shards of living glass, silent and beautiful, carrying weapons that could split moons if diplomatic language failed. Beside them in influence stood the Carthun Ascendancy, a vast military civilization built around honor, hierarchy, and ancient conquest. Their bodies were heavy and armored by nature, their fleets slow but nearly impossible to break. The Carthun respected strength above all things, and because they had so much of it, many species bowed before they were asked. Then there were the Aurelian choirs, a civilization of aquatic minds linked through song across oceans and stars. They had no empire in the traditional sense, yet their influence flowed everywhere. They were diplomats, historians, memory keepers, and manipulators of sound, so advanced that they could calm riots, shatter stone, or communicate across entire systems through harmonic relays. Below the great powers were the respected civilizations. The Mavran trade houses, who controlled half the legal shipping routes through the inner arms. The Selari technocracy, whose machines could repair themselves faster than most species could damage them. The Drune hives, whose queens governed billions of workers across mineral-rich worlds. The Illith Republic, small in territory but rich in philosophy, law, and cultural influence. The Teshari Cloudborn, who lived in the upper atmospheres of gas giants and considered solid ground a primitive inconvenience. Beneath them were dozens of smaller powers, regional alliances, planetary unions, moon-bound cultures, nomadic fleet societies, and young species only recently admitted into galactic awareness. They traded, argued, competed, petitioned, and struggled for recognition from those above them. Every civilization had a place. Every species was measured. Age mattered. Technology mattered. Military strength mattered. Cultural achievement mattered. A species with ancient monuments, stable government, advanced ships, and useful exports might be granted respect. A species with powerful weapons might be feared even if it was disliked. A species with rare knowledge might be protected. A species with nothing to offer was ignored. And at the very bottom of that ladder were humans. Humanity came from a small blue world circling an unremarkable yellow star in a quiet region of the Orion Arm. Their home system had little strategic value. Their star was ordinary. Their biology was ordinary. Their lifespans were short. Their technology was crude by galactic standards. When humans first reached beyond their homeworld, the galaxy barely noticed. Their earliest ships were slow, clumsy things, built from metal, fire, stubbornness, and mathematics that older species considered embarrassingly simple. Their first colonies were fragile. Their politics were chaotic. Their languages were many. Their history was soaked in war, contradiction, beauty, cruelty, genius, and self-destruction. To the great powers, humans were a curiosity at best. A young species. A noisy species. A dangerous species, perhaps, but only to themselves. They had not mastered true gravity shaping. They did not possess living starships. They had no empire worth naming, no ancient relics, no seat among the major councils, no voice in the great assemblies where galactic law was written. The Vayer called them sparks. The Carthun called them soft. The Aurelian choirs called them unfinished songs. The Mavran merchants called them bad investments. And so humanity was placed where the galaxy believed it belonged. At the bottom, below the great powers, below the respected civilizations, below the minor alliances. below the species who had already learned how to bow properly. Humanity was tolerated, dismissed, and occasionally studied. Their delegates were seated in the outer galleries. Their trade requests were delayed. Their ships were inspected more often than necessary. Their warnings were ignored. Their achievements were politely minimized. The galaxy looked down at humanity and saw a primitive people reaching for stars they did not yet understand. And for a while, humanity said nothing. They watched. They listened. They learned the rules and who held power. They learned who pretended kindness and who preyed on the weak. They learned that the galaxy, for all its songs and counsels and ancient wisdom, was still a ladder. And every ladder had someone standing at the bottom. But the ancient stories had forgotten one thing about light and darkness. The light did not win because it was gentle. It won because, when the darkness came to consume everything, the light refused to go out. Chapter 2: The Academy. Humanity knew what the galaxy thought of them. Primitive, young, loud, messy. Useful perhaps in small ways, but not important. Not yet. Not in the way the old civilizations measured importance. To the great powers of the Milky Way, human ships looked almost embarrassing. They were not grown from crystal, like the vessels of the Vayer Dominion. They did not glide on harmonic fields like the Aurelian craft. They did not carry the heavy, ceremonial armor of the Carthun battle cruisers. Human ships were clunky things, all welded plates, exposed framework, bolted panels, heat scars, and engine housings that looked too large for the hulls they pushed. They rattled when they accelerated and groaned when they entered hard burn. They leaked heat, vented steam, and required constant maintenance from engineers who usually fixed problems by swearing at them first and replacing parts later. Older species laughed at them. Humanity did not. A human ship was not beautiful by galactic standards, but it was honest. Every plate had a purpose. Every brace had been added after something had broken once and killed someone. Their vessels were built by a species that had clawed its way into orbit on controlled explosion and stubborn math. They were ugly, heavy, inefficient, and underpowered compared to the elegant ships of the great powers. But they flew. And for humanity, that had always been enough to start. The first generations of human interstellar vessels had opened routes between Earth, Mars, the Jovian moons, the scattered colonies, and eventually the outer edges of accepted galactic trade. Their exploration ships were small by council standards, barely worthy of official notice. They carried more emergency tools than luxuries, more backup systems than decorations, and more hope than military strength. The galaxy saw weakness. Humans saw progress. On Earth, beneath the cold blue sky of the Northern Hemisphere, the United Terran Academy stood on a high ridge overlooking the Pacific coastline. Its campus was a strange mix of old human ambition and new galactic imitation. Stone buildings from earlier centuries stood beside glass lecture halls, orbital simulation towers, flight domes, and docking platforms where training shuttles rose and fell throughout the day. Cadets came there from every corner of human space, from the tower cities of Luna and the mining domes of Mars, from orbital habitats over Jupiter, from ocean platforms, desert states, island nations, colony worlds, and old cities whose names had survived wars, treaties, disasters, and rebirths. Garrett came from Alaska. He had been born under long winters, wide skies, and mountains that seemed too stubborn to move for anything as small as weather. His childhood had been shaped by cold air, pine forests, rough hands, and the kind of silence that only existed far from cities. He had learned to repair engines before he learned to enjoy school. He had hunted, climbed, fished, worked rescue drones through blizzards, and once spent 2 nights alone in a storm shelter after a training aircraft went down in the northern range. By the time he arrived at the academy, Garrett looked like he had wandered out of the wilderness and accidentally enrolled. He was broad-shouldered, strong from labor, more than gym discipline, with a face that always seemed one step away from either a smile or a fight. His beard was neatly groomed, trimmed carefully enough to pass academy regulations, but thick enough that it still made him look more like a mountain man than a cadet. His dark hair never stayed properly combed, no matter how many times instructors corrected him. His uniform fit well enough, though somehow he always made it look like field gear. He was smart but not polished, capable but not graceful, and entirely too honest for politics. Garrett did well in practical courses: navigation under pressure, field repair, survival logistics, emergency command, shipboard systems. If a machine was broken, he could usually understand it. If a problem had teeth, fire, gravity failure, or a limited oxygen supply, Garrett became calm in a way that unsettled classmates who performed better in lectures. In ceremonial diplomacy, however, he was a disaster. During his first-year interspecies etiquette exam, he accidentally insulted a visiting Celari professor by telling her that her autonomous robe looked like it wanted to eat somebody. The robe had, in fact, been a formal academic garment with minor defensive features. Garrett failed the exam. The professor laughed for 3 minutes. That became his reputation. The Alaskan, the mountain man, the cadet who could rebuild a shuttle's intake, manifold in freezing rain, but could not properly greet a gas giant ambassador. He did not care much. At least not until he met Rebecca. She entered his life in the second semester during advanced stellar navigation, walking into the lecture hall 5 minutes late, with a stack of data slates tucked under one arm, and a look on her face that suggested the universe had personally inconvenienced her that morning. Garrett looked up. And that was it. He had never believed in love at first sight. He had believed in cold weather, good boots, reliable engines, and coffee strong enough to taste like a mistake. He believed in things that could be tested, fixed, carried, or survived. Then Rebecca walked past his row, and Garrett forgot whatever the instructor had been saying. She was not delicate. That was the first thing he noticed. She carried herself with purpose, chin lifted, eyes sharp, hair pulled back in a way that was practical rather than decorative. She had the kind of beauty that did not ask for attention, but took it anyway. Intelligent eyes, quick expression, a mouth that looked like it knew how to win arguments and enjoy doing it. She took the empty seat beside him, because it was the only one left. Garrett stared at his own data slate like it contained the secrets of creation. "You're in my lab group, aren't you?" she whispered. He blinked and looked at her. "I am." Rebecca glanced at his name patch. "Garrett Hale." "Yes," he said, then immediately hated how rough his voice sounded. "I'm Rebecca Sloan. Try not to get us killed in the simulator." Garrett should have said something clever. He did not. "I'll do my best." She gave him a small smile and turned toward the lecture. Garrett sat there, very still, as if sudden movement might scare the moment away. By the end of that week, they were arguing over navigation math. By the end of that month, they were studying together every night. By the end of the semester, everyone at the academy knew that Garrett and Rebecca had become inseparable. They balanced each other in ways neither of them admitted at first. Rebecca was precise where Garrett was instinctive. Garrett was steady where Rebecca burned too hot. She could read political subtext and command structure better than he could. He could make sense of failing hardware with half the information and twice the pressure. She teased him for his beard, his boots, his accent, and the way he treated every broken machine like a wounded animal. He teased her for organizing her notes with the seriousness of a military invasion. They competed constantly. They defended each other fiercely. In flight simulations, Rebecca could calculate the perfect route through a debris field. Garrett could feel when the ship was about to lose thrust before the instruments confirmed it. Together, they became one of the best pairs in their class. The academy noticed. So did their classmates. There were jokes, of course. There always were. Some called them orbit-locked. Others called them the disaster couple, because when they argued, entire rooms went quiet. But no one questioned the results. Garrett loved her quietly at first, then completely. He loved the way she tapped 2 fingers against her chin when thinking. He loved the way she refused to pretend ignorance just to make someone else comfortable. He loved that she could cut through his stubbornness with one look. He loved her laugh, rare and bright, and the way it made him feel as if something warm had survived inside him even after long days of exhaustion and discipline. Rebecca loved him too, though she was slower to say it. She loved that Garrett did not perform intelligence, he simply used it. She loved that he listened when it mattered, even if he joked when it did not. She loved that beneath all his rough edges was a man almost painfully loyal. He did not give his heart easily, but once he did, he planted himself like a mountain and did not move. By graduation year, their future became the question neither of them wanted to ask. Assignments after the academy were not chosen by romance. Exploration service needed officers everywhere. Some were sent to chart distant systems. Some were assigned to cargo escort. Some joined diplomatic survey crews. Others disappeared into military support roles, border mapping, or deep space research missions that lasted years. Garrett pretended not to worry. Rebecca knew better. One night, 2 weeks before final assignments were released, she found him outside the simulator dome, leaning against a railing and staring up at the stars. The academy lights glowed behind him. Beyond the ridge, the Pacific stretched black and silver under the moon. "You're doing that thing again," she said. Garrett did not look over. "What thing?" Standing alone like a tragic recruitment poster. He smiled faintly. She stepped beside him. "You're worried about assignments." "No," he said, liar. He sighed, "Yes." Rebecca looked up at the stars with him. She said, "We knew this might happen." "I know," he muttered. "We both signed up for exploration service." "I know. We might be assigned to different ships." She said with panic in her voice, "I know." She turned to him, "Garrett." He looked at her then, and whatever joke he had prepared died before reaching his mouth. "I can't," he said quietly. Rebecca's expression softened. He looked embarrassed by the honesty, but he kept going. "I know how that sounds. I know service comes first. I know I'm supposed to salute and accept whatever orders come down. But I can't spend the next 5 years on the other side of human space, pretending I'm fine, with seeing you once every 6 months through a delayed transmission." Rebecca said nothing. Garrett looked away. "I don't want to leave your side." The admission hung between them. For once, Rebecca did not tease him. She reached over and took his hand. "Then don't," she said. So Garrett did what Garrett did best. He found a way. His cousin, Captain Elias Hale, served in the exploration fleet. Not high enough to change policy outright, but high enough to know which ships needed which officers, where requests could be nudged, and how to make a personnel file arrive on the right desk at the right time. Garrett called in every family favor he had. Elias was not impressed. "You want me to risk my reputation so you can follow a girl onto a ship?" His cousin asked over a secure channel. Garrett stood in the Academy Communications booth, jaw tight. "No. I want you to make sure two of the best Academy graduates in the same operational track are assigned where their combined performance makes sense." Elias stared at him. That sounded rehearsed. It was. "Did Rebecca write it?" "Most of it." Elias leaned back and laughed. Then his expression softened. "You sure about this?" Garrett did not hesitate. "Yes." A week later, final assignments were released. Rebecca opened hers first. Exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. Deep range survey and first contact support. Departure 3 weeks. Garrett opened his a second later. Exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. Engineering and Field Operations Division. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rebecca looked at him. "What did you do?" Garrett tried to look innocent. It did not work. "Administrative excellence." She asked Garrett. "I may have talked to Elias." He replied slowly, "You pulled strings." Rebecca shouted. "Tiny strings. Military assignment strings. Very small military assignment strings." She stared at him for another second. Then she kissed him, hard. When she pulled back, she was smiling despite herself. "You are impossible." Garrett grinned. "But assigned to the same ship." Rebecca shook her head, but she did not let go of his hand. Above them, the old Academy announcement screens continued scrolling names and assignments, futures being handed out line by line. Around them, cadets cheered, groaned, celebrated, panicked, and began imagining the lives waiting beyond Earth. For Garrett and Rebecca, the path was set. They would leave Earth together and serve together. They would step into the wider galaxy side by side, aboard a human exploration ship that most ancient civilizations would consider crude, weak, and barely worth noticing. The galaxy still saw humanity at the bottom of the ladder. Garrett knew that. Rebecca knew it too. But as they stood beneath the Academy lights with their assignments glowing on their slates, neither of them felt small. They felt like the universe had opened a door. And together, they were ready to walk through it. Chapter 3: Something Stirs. Something was stirring in the galaxy. At first, no one called it war. War had shape. War had banners, fleets, declarations, borders, insults, old grudges, and carefully written accusations delivered through diplomatic channels. War had causes the great civilizations could argue over in council chambers and military halls. This was different. This was silence. A Maverick trade convoy vanished along a legal shipping route between two prosperous systems. 6 vessels, 32,000 tons of cargo, 112 crew members, and a licensed escort frigate disappeared without sending a distress signal. The Maverick blamed pirates. The pirates denied involvement, which no one believed until 2 pirate vessels vanished 3 days later in the same region. Then a Celari machine probe station went dark near the southern rim. The Celari technocracy accused the Carthun ascendancy of testing stealth weapons. The Carthun called the accusation cowardly and insulting. 3 fleets moved to alert status before the Aurelian choirs intervened, singing calm into the diplomatic channels until both sides agreed to a joint investigation. The investigation ship never returned. After that, colonies began reporting lights in the dark. Not ships exactly. Not signatures anyone could identify. Just brief distortions at the edge of sensor range. Dead zones in communications. Automated mining outposts torn apart with no debris trail. Research stations found empty, their doors sealed from the inside, their logs corrupted into meaningless static. The great powers grew suspicious. The Vayer Dominion accused the Mavrin trade houses of hiding smuggling routes. The Mavrin accused the Droon hives of raiding cargo lanes. The Droon blamed the Carthoon. The Carthoon blamed everyone. Smaller species began pulling back from shared borders. Convoys traveled in larger groups. Patrol fleets doubled their sweeps. Trade slowed. Diplomats smiled less. Old rivalries, buried under treaties and commerce, began to sharpen again. No one knew what was happening. And because no one knew, everyone began assuming the worst of each other. Across the Milky Way, fear spread in pieces. A missing ship here. A burned colony beacon there. A dead moon relay. A shattered orbital ring. A child's transmission cut short in the middle of a lullaby. The galaxy had spent ages climbing its ladder of power, measuring who stood above and who stood below. Now, from somewhere beyond that ladder, something unseen had reached in and begun shaking it. But most civilizations did not yet understand the danger. Not truly. The great powers were too proud. The respected civilizations were too suspicious. The smaller species were too afraid. And humanity at the bottom of the ladder received only fragments, delayed reports, redacted briefings, rumor chains, and warnings no one bothered to explain fully. So the human exploration fleet kept doing what it had always done. Exploring and mapping. Listening and learning. The Horizon's Edge was not an impressive vessel by galactic standards. To a Vayer architect, it would have looked crude. To a Carthoon admiral, underarmed. To a Mavrin trader, inefficient. It was a long-range human exploration ship, built with layered armor plates, practical corridors, oversized engines, too many backup systems, and not nearly enough elegance. But to the humans aboard, she was home. She carried survey teams, xenobiologists, geologists, atmospheric specialists, pilots, engineers, and enough stubborn optimism to push into places older species considered unprofitable. Her mission was simple: chart frontier systems along the outer galactic edge, catalog habitable worlds, assess mineral resources, and establish navigation points for future human vessels. Garrett loved her. Not because she was beautiful, because she was not. The Horizon's Edge creaked under hard acceleration. Her port stabilizer had a recurring vibration that engineering had named the washing machine, and one of the galley dispensers produced coffee that tasted faintly of metal no matter how often it was cleaned. Garrett loved her because she was human. Ugly, tough, overbuilt, and alive. Rebecca Sloan loved her for different reasons. She loved the maps, the quiet observation decks, the way every jump opened a new set of unknowns, the way frontier space made even the most arrogant academy theories feel small. Together, they had spent 2 years aboard the Horizon's Edge after graduation. 2 years of survey missions. 2 years of repair shifts, planetary landings, arguments over navigation models, shared meals, delayed reports, and stolen moments in observation domes when duty allowed them to pretend the universe belonged only to them. Garrett had known after 6 days that he wanted to marry her. It took him another 1.5 years to build the courage to do anything about it. He had planned it badly. That was not his intention, but it was the truth. The Horizon's Edge had entered a quiet system near the outer edge of mapped galactic territory. The system had no settlements, no trade lanes, and no political value. Its star was small and golden. Its third planet was a blue-gray gas giant wrapped in pale storms. Around that planet orbited 7 moons, one of which had atmosphere, forests, rivers, and a night sky so clear that the stars looked close enough to touch. The moon was officially catalogued as HX 117c. Garrett immediately hated the name. "That's not a name," he said as the landing shuttle cut through the upper atmosphere. "That's a serial number somebody gave up on." Rebecca sat beside him, reviewing survey data. "It is a perfectly functional designation. It has forest, rivers, and mountains. You can't call a place like that HX 117c. What would you call it?" she asked. Garrett looked through the cockpit glass at the moon below. Endless dark forests rolled beneath clouds, broken by silver lakes and ridgelines catching the last light of the system's star. He thought for a moment. "Becca." She turned slowly and said, "No." "What?" He immediately responded, "You are not naming a moon after me." "Technically, I discovered this particular landing site." He said with a serious look, "You did not discover the moon. I discovered the part we're landing on." "That is not how naming rights work," she said, giggling. Garrett grinned. "Could be." Rebecca gave him the look, the one that said she loved him, but was strongly considering leaving him on the moon. He laughed and turned back toward the descent display. The official mission was routine. A two-person overnight surface survey to test atmospheric stability, collect soil samples, scan local plant life, and confirm whether the moon was safe for future scientific teams. Garrett had volunteered immediately. Rebecca had suspected something immediately. She knew him too well. "What are you planning?" she asked as the shuttle touched down in a clearing near the edge of a forest. Garrett unbuckled his restraints. "Survey work." "Garrett," she insisted, "important survey work." You packed a thermal blanket, 2 ration packs, an atmospheric tent, a portable stove, and 3 different fire starters. "That's standard." She raised an eyebrow before saying, "You also packed coffee, real coffee, not dispenser sludge." "That's morale." "And a guitar," she said with a raised eyebrow. "That's cultural outreach." "There are no people here." "Then the trees are in for a treat." Rebecca stared at him for a long second. He tried to look innocent. He failed as always. The moon's air was cool and clean when they stepped outside. It smelled faintly of pine, rain, and something sweet Garrett could not identify. The gravity was a little lower than Earth's, just enough that every step felt lighter. Above them, the gas giant filled a portion of the sky, immense and blue-gray, its storm bands glowing softly in the fading light. The forest around the clearing was strange but familiar enough to comfort him. Tall dark trunks rose in clusters, their leaves thin and silver-edged. Small lights flickered among the branches, bioluminescent insects or spores, Rebecca guessed, though she immediately corrected herself and said they needed samples before naming them. Garrett set up camp near a ring of smooth stones beside a narrow stream. Rebecca watched him work. "You already knew this place was here," she said. "I reviewed the landing scans. You chose this site. It had good survey value. It has a perfect view of the stars. That too. And a natural fire ring. Convenient, isn't it?" He laughed. Rebecca crossed her arms, but she was smiling now. Garrett built the campfire with the seriousness of a man assembling a sacred machine. He cleared the ground, arranged stones, checked the wind, placed the fuel, and started the flame with one of his unnecessary fire starters. The fire caught quickly, warm orange light rising into the twilight. Rebecca sat on a fallen log nearby, watching him. "You know we have heaters," she said. "Yes." "And portable lamps." "Yes." "And a stove." "Rebecca, I swear, If you keep attacking the concept of fire, I'm going to take it personally." She laughed. That laugh nearly ruined him. Garrett had faced vacuum leaks, engine fires, academy exams, alien customs officers, and Rebecca angry before breakfast. None of them scared him as much as the small box hidden in his jacket pocket. He had rehearsed the proposal 37 times. In the mirror, in maintenance shafts, in the shower, once accidentally over an open engineering channel, which had led to 3 technicians applauding and one asking if he needed help with the ring size. He had planned to wait until the stars were fully out. He had planned to say something meaningful, something about Earth and the Academy, and how every unknown system felt less unknown with her beside him. Something about how he had spent his whole life looking up at mountains and stars, but had never understood home until she sat beside him in that navigation lecture and told him not to get her killed. It was going to be perfect. Then Rebecca handed him a mug of coffee, looked up at the gas giant rising over the trees, and said softly, "This is beautiful." And Garrett's brain abandoned him. "Marry me," he blurted out. Rebecca froze. Garrett froze too. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the forest, an alien insect chirped like a tiny broken violin. Rebecca slowly turned her head. "What?" Garrett closed his eyes. "No," he muttered. That was not how that was supposed to go. Rebecca set her mug down carefully. Garrett stood, fumbled in his jacket pocket, nearly dropped the box, caught it against his chest, and then got down on one knee so abruptly that his boot slipped in the soft moss. He windmilled one arm. Rebecca gasped. He recovered with absolutely no dignity. "I'm fine," he said quickly. "Garrett." "No, hold on, I had a speech." She covered her mouth, but her eyes were already wet with laughter. Garrett opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, human-made. A small band of dark metal with a tiny blue stone set into it, not expensive by galactic standards, but chosen with care. The stone came from Alaska, cut from a mineral deposit near where Garrett had grown up. He looked up at her, firelight flickering across his face. "I had this whole thing planned," he said. "And I was going to be smooth. Very smooth. Historically smooth." Rebecca laughed through her tears. "Were you? No. Probably not." He smiled, nervous and helpless and completely in love. "But I was going to tell you that I have loved you since the first day you sat beside me and told me not to get us killed. And I was going to tell you that every place I've ever been feels better when you're there. Earth, the Academy, this ugly old ship, a random moon with a terrible official name." Rebecca's smile softened. Garrett swallowed. "I don't know where exploration service is going to take us. I don't know what the galaxy's going to do. I don't know if humanity will ever climb that ladder everyone keeps talking about." He took a breath. "But I know I want to face every unknown with you. I know I want every star we see to be one we saw together. And I know that if you say yes, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." The fire popped softly. Garrett held up the ring. "Rebecca Sloan, will you marry me?" For once, Rebecca did not answer immediately. She looked at him, at the ring, at the fire, at the enormous planet hanging above the forest, and then back at the rugged, foolish, impossible man kneeling in the moss before her. "Yes," she whispered. Garrett blinked. "Yes." He asked, "Yes, you idiot." He laughed, half relief and half disbelief, and slid the ring onto her finger with hands that were not nearly as steady as he wanted them to be. Then she pulled him up by his jacket and kissed him hard enough that he almost lost his balance again. This time she held onto him, Later, they lay beside the fire beneath the thermal blanket, shoulders pressed together, the ring catching firelight whenever Rebecca moved her hand. Above them, the sky opened. Stars crowded the darkness in impossible numbers. The gas giant loomed vast and silent, its pale storms turning slowly. The forest whispered around them, strange and peaceful. The horizon's edge waited in orbit, a small human ship in a galaxy that barely knew humanity existed. Garrett turned his head slightly. Still think HFY 117C is a good name. Rebecca did not open her eyes. No. So we can call it Becca? No. Engagement moon? Absolutely not. Proposal rock? There was no rock involved. Proposal moss? She smiled despite herself. Go to sleep, Garrett. He grinned and looked back up at the stars. For a while, neither of them spoke. There, beside the small campfire on a quiet moon at the edge of the galaxy, the darkness seemed very far away. Ships were vanishing in distant systems. Colonies were whispering about mysterious attacks. Ancient powers were accusing one another, while something hidden moved between the stars. But Garrett and Rebecca did not know that yet. Not really. They knew only the warmth of the fire and weight of the stars. The promise on her hand. And slowly, wrapped in quiet and each other, they fell asleep beneath the watching sky. Chapter 4: The Becoming. Garrett woke up because the universe hated him. At least that was his first thought. The fire had burned low beside him, reduced to a bed of red-orange coals beneath a few curling tongues of flame. The forest around the camp was quiet, washed in silver light from the gas giant hanging huge in the sky. Rebecca slept beside him beneath the thermal blanket, one hand tucked near her face, the ring on her finger catching the faint glow of the embers. For a moment, Garrett forgot why he had woken. He just looked at her. Then his bladder reminded him. "Oh, come on," he whispered. He tried to ignore it. He closed his eyes, shifted slightly, took a deep breath, told himself that he was comfortable, warm, and perfectly capable of waiting until morning. His body disagreed. Garrett carefully slid out from under the blanket, moving slowly so he would not wake Rebecca. She stirred once, murmured something half-formed, then settled again. "Be right back," he whispered, even though she could not hear him. He pulled on his boots, grabbed the small field light from his pack, and stepped away from the campfire. The moon's night air was cool against his face. The trees stood tall and still around him, their silver-edged leaves whispering faintly in a breeze he could barely feel. Far above, the stars burned bright and crowded, scattered across the sky like crushed glass. The gas giant's pale bands moved slowly, enormous and silent, making the entire world feel small beneath it. Garrett walked a short distance into the trees, far enough to be polite, close enough not to be stupid. He found a spot near a cluster of dark stones and started to unzip his field trousers. That was when he saw the light. At first, he thought it was a reflection from the fire. Just a faint pulse between the trees. Then it flickered again. Blue-white and soft. Not firelight. Not bioluminescent insects. Not the warm glow of the alien plants around them. Garrett froze. "Of course," he muttered. "Of course, the weird glowing thing shows up when I'm trying to pee." The light pulsed again. It came from farther ahead, near the base of a low ridge where tree roots curled over exposed stone. Garrett narrowed his eyes and lifted the field light, but the beam barely reached that far. The glow seemed to retreat when he looked directly at it, then brighten when he glanced slightly away. Every academy survival instructor he had ever had would have told him not to follow strange lights into dark places on an unexplored moon. Garrett knew that. He also knew Rebecca would murder him if he ignored a possible scientific anomaly. He zipped back up with a sigh. 5 minutes, he told himself. Look, scan. Mark coordinates, wake Rebecca. Responsible adult behavior. He started walking. The light led him to a small cave tucked beneath the ridge. It was almost hidden by hanging roots and stone shelves, the entrance no taller than Garrett's shoulders. A faint blue glow leaked from within, pulsing gently against the rock. Garrett tapped his comm. Garrett to camp, he whispered. Static answered. He frowned. Garrett to horizon's edge. More static. Not dead silence. Interference. Soft, rolling, almost musical. He pulled out his handheld scanner. The device woke with a quiet chirp and immediately began throwing uncertainty markers. No radiation, Garrett said under his breath. No heat spike. No energy signature. No biological marker. No electromagnetic source. The glow pulsed brighter inside the cave. Garrett stared at his scanner. That is profoundly unhelpful. He should have gone back, and he would learn that later. He somewhat knew it even then. But Garrett had always been the kind of man who wanted to understand the thing making the noise in the dark. That instinct had saved lives aboard ships. It had helped him repair engines, find faults, track failures, and solve problems other people stepped around. So he ducked beneath the roots and entered the cave. Inside, the air was still. Too still. The stone walls were smooth, not naturally worn, but not cut by tools either. Garrett shone his field light across them and saw faint patterns beneath the surface, lines almost like veins of crystal embedded in the rock. They did not glow, but they caught the blue light from deeper inside. The cave opened into a small chamber. At its center floated a sphere. It was no larger than Garrett's fist, glowing with soft white-blue light. Its surface was smooth at first glance, but as he stepped closer, he saw tiny panels shifting across it, layers unfolding and refolding with impossible precision. It made no sound, yet the air around it vibrated faintly against his skin. Garrett raised the scanner again. Nothing. The sphere gave no reading. No mass or power output. No material composition or temperature. According to his equipment, nothing was there. Garrett looked from the scanner to the floating object. Well, he said, that's rude. The sphere snapped toward him. Garrett jumped back. The little orb zipped through the air, stopping a few inches from his face. Its surface brightened. A ring of tiny lights spun around its middle like an excited thought. Then it spoke. Yes, yes, yes. Finally, finally, you have come. Garrett stared. The voice was quick, bright, and strange. Not exactly mechanical. Not exactly alive. It sounded like a scientist who had consumed far too much coffee and had been left alone with a breakthrough for several thousand years. Garrett slowly lowered the scanner. You speak English. Of course I speak English, the sphere said, circling his head. Primitive, flexible, contradictory, emotionally overloaded but functional. Very functional. Fascinating language. Terrible spelling. Garrett turned, trying to keep it in view. What are you? No time for that. Well, there is time, technically, but not useful time. Let me see. Let me see. The sphere darted around him, faster now. A soft beam of light passed over Garrett's face, then chest, then arms. He felt warmth where it touched him, but no pain. The scanner in his hand flickered and died. Hey, Garrett said, back up. The sphere ignored him. Yes. Dense musculature. Excellent stress response. High adaptability. Mild dehydration. Bladder pressure elevated. Irrelevant though amusing. Neural plasticity, oh very good. Emotional anchor recently reinforced. Bond imprint strong. Protective instinct high. Survival stubbornness excessive, perfect. Yes, yes, you work perfectly. Garrett's heart began to pound. I work perfectly for what? The sphere stopped in front of him. For the first time, its frantic motion stilled. Its glow deepened from blue-white to gold. For the war, it said. Garrett's mouth went dry. What war? The first one, the last one, the one that never ended, the one your little songs forgot and your oldest bones remember. Garrett took a step back. The sphere drifted closer. Who made you? Garrett asked. Oh, that is a long answer, too long. Also partially classified. Also partially impossible for your current biology. But not for long. Garrett raised a hand. No. Absolutely not. Whatever that means, no. The sphere tilted, somehow looking offended despite having no face. No. It asked no. Garrett said firmly, curious. Vocal resistance detected, expected, ignoring. Do not ignore, the sphere shot forward. It hit him in the chest, not hard. That was the strange part. It did not feel like being struck. It felt like being pushed by something slow and enormous, something that did not care about muscles or bone. Garrett staggered back one step. Then another. His shoulders hit the cave wall. The orb sank into him. Garrett gasped and the light spread beneath his skin. It started at the center of his chest, a white gold glow blooming under his shirt, then branching outward in thin lines like lightning trapped inside his veins. He clawed at his jacket, tearing it open, staring as the light moved through him. No, he breathed. The sphere's voice came from everywhere now. Integration beginning. Garrett fell to one knee. His blood turned to fire. Not burning. Not pain exactly. Something deeper, pressure. Expansion. Like every cell in his body had become a door, and something vast was pouring through all of them at once. Light crawled up his arms, across his throat, down his spine. His heartbeat thundered, then multiplied as if something else had learned its rhythm and joined it. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Images flashed through his mind of stars being born. Darkness coiling between galaxies and battlefields older than matter. Figures made of light standing against shapes that should not exist. A voice, not the sphere's voice, but something larger and ancient said, "Stand." Garrett's back arched. The cave filled with radiance. The lines beneath his skin widened, brightening until his body became a map of white gold fire. His muscles tightened, not growing larger exactly, but becoming more defined and denser, as if every weakness was being rewritten. Old scars faded and new patterns formed across his chest and arms, luminous lines beneath the skin, geometric and organic at once. His eyes changed. The brown of them filled with gold. For one terrifying moment, Garrett saw the cave not as stone and shadow, but as energy, memory, and structure. He saw heat through rock. He saw the campfire beyond the trees and Rebecca sleeping. He saw the horizon's edge in orbit. He saw distant stars flicker with a hidden sickness. And beneath it all, far away and approaching, he felt the darkness, hungry, patient, awake. Then everything went black, and Garrett awoke on the cave floor. The glow was gone. The sphere was gone. His scanner was a melted lump beside his hand, and for a while, he could not move. His body felt both impossibly heavy and impossibly light. Every breath seemed too loud, and every heartbeat too strong. He pushed himself upright and nearly cracked the stone beneath his palm. He froze. His hand glowed faintly. White gold lines pulsed beneath the skin, dim but visible. They ran along his fingers, across the back of his hand under his sleeve. Garrett pulled his sleeve up slowly, and the light continued. It traced his forearm in thin patterns, like veins made of dawn. "Oh," he whispered. "That's bad." He stood too quickly and hit his head on the cave ceiling. The ceiling cracked, and Garrett stared at the fracture in the stone. "That's not good either." He stumbled toward the cave entrance, catching himself against the wall. The rock crumbled slightly under his grip. He let go as if burned. Outside, the forest was brighter than it should have been. Not because the moon had changed, but because he could see more. Every leaf had edges of light, and every insect left a faint trail in the air. The stream near the camp sounded like individual beads of water striking stone. The fire's heat touched his skin from a distance. Garrett staggered back toward camp. He found the fire still low, the blanket still half folded, Rebecca still asleep. For one selfish second, he considered not waking her and stood there in the dark, glowing faintly, terrified of what she would see when she opened her eyes. Then Rebecca shifted. Her eyes opened and saw the shape standing beyond the fire. She screamed. Garrett raised both hands. "Becca. Becca, it's me." She scrambled backward, grabbing the emergency flare pistol from beside the pack and aiming it at his chest. "Garrett?" she asked. It's me. The firelight caught his face and Rebecca stared. He knew what she saw. His skin looked wrong now, lit from within by thin white gold lines. His eyes glowed faintly. His torn shirt showed light pulsing across his chest where the sphere had entered him. Her hands shook around the flare pistol. "What happened to you?" "I followed a light." For half a second, despite everything, Rebecca looked like she might actually kill him. "You what?" she yelled. "You followed a light." He replied, "I know. On an unexplored moon." "I know, Becca." She lowered the flare pistol slowly, horror overtaking anger. The scientist in her wanted to understand. And the woman who loved him only saw something alien wrapped around the man she had just agreed to marry. She rushed to him. Garrett stepped back instinctively. "Don't touch me. I don't know if it's dangerous." Rebecca ignored him and grabbed his face with both hands. Nothing happened. No shock or burn. No spread of light. Her eyes searched his. "Are you in pain?" "No, not exactly." "Can you breathe?" "Yes." "Do you know who I am?" Despite the terror, Garrett almost smiled. "You're Rebecca Sloan. You hate bad navigation math. You alphabetize emergency kits for fun. And about 4 hours ago, you made the questionable decision to marry me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, you're still you." "I think so." He replied, "We're getting you back to the ship." "Yeah, now." She yelled. "Yes, ma'am." She moved fast. The camp was abandoned in minutes. Rebecca called the shuttle on emergency recall, and when the signal struggled through interference, she bypassed half the safety delays with a speed Garrett would have admired if he had not been busy trying not to panic. The shuttle arrived in the clearing, with landing lights blazing. As they lifted off, Garrett looked down at the forest. The cave was gone. The ridge was still there. The trees. The stones. But the dark opening beneath the roots had vanished, as if it had never existed. Rebecca saw his face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The cave's gone," Garrett said with a chill in his voice. She looked down through the shuttle glass. Then she swore softly. Aboard the horizon's edge, everything became alarms. Medical teams met them in the shuttle bay. Security arrived seconds later. Garrett was placed in an isolation field before he could protest. Rebecca stayed beside him until the ship's doctor ordered her back. She refused. The doctor tried again. Rebecca told him exactly where he could put that order. Garrett would have laughed if the medical scanners were not all screaming contradictory results. He has no radiation contamination, one medic said. Then why is he glowing? Another asked. I don't know. Blood chemistry. Asked the doctor. Changing fast, replied a nurse. To what? I don't know, sir. Foreign organism. No organism detected, sir. Nanotech. No nanostructures detected. Then what is inside him? The medic looked at Garrett through the isolation field. I don't know. That answer became the theme of the next hour. The captain of the Horizon's Edge ordered immediate return to human space. Every available log was sealed and transmitted ahead. Rebecca remained in the medical bay, one hand pressed against the isolation field, watching Garrett through the shimmer. He sat on the examination platform, shirtless now, white gold lines pulsing across his chest and arms. Becca, he said quietly, I'm here. If this gets worse, don't. If I'm not me, you are. But if, Garrett Hale, I swear to God, if you try to make some noble speech right now, I will sedate you myself. He closed his mouth. She nodded once, good. The Horizon's Edge broke orbit and began its emergency burn toward Earth-controlled space. It did not travel alone for long. 6 hours into the journey, a massive human military vessel intercepted them at the edge of a transit lane. The ship dropped from jump ahead of the exploration vessel, dark and armored, its running lights cold blue against the stars. Compared to the Horizon's Edge, it was enormous, a military cruiser built for war instead of discovery, all heavy plates, weapon housings, and shield emitters. A transmission came through immediately. This is the UTS Resolute to exploration vessel, Horizon's Edge. We have received your medical emergency transmission. You are ordered to maintain current heading. We will escort you to Orion Station. The crew of the Horizon's Edge did not argue. No one knew what Garrett had become. That made him a medical emergency, a security threat, a scientific impossibility, and, though no one said it aloud, possibly something far more dangerous. The Resolute stayed close for the rest of the journey, its weapons cold but ready, its presence a silent reminder that humanity did not understand what was happening and therefore intended to be prepared for the worst. Garrett watched the cruiser from the med bay display. Guess I got important, he said. Rebecca sat beside the isolation field, exhausted but awake. You got infected by a glowing cave ball, she said sternly. That's one way to put it. It's the accurate way. I was hoping for something with more dignity. You lost dignity when you followed the glowing cave ball. Fair. She tried to smile, but it didn't last. He reached toward the field, and she pressed her hand against the other side. The barrier shimmered between them. I'm scared, he said. Rebecca's expression broke. I know. I can feel things. What things? He looked toward the stars beyond the ship. Something out there, far away. Like a storm in the distance. Rebecca said nothing. Garrett's eyes glowed faintly gold. And I think it knows I'm awake. Orion Station orbited one of humanity's larger frontier colonies, a blue-white world wrapped in clouds and city lights. The station itself was massive by human standards. A rotating ring, central docking spine, medical research platforms, naval berths, defense arrays, and civilian habitats all connected by glittering transport tubes. To the great civilizations of the galaxy, it would have seemed functional but unimpressive. To Garrett, arriving under military escort while glowing like a haunted reactor core, it looked like salvation. The Horizon's Edge docked under emergency quarantine protocol. The Resolute took position nearby. Medical teams waited before the airlock doors had finished cycling. Garrett was moved in a sealed transport field, surrounded by doctors, security officers, sensor specialists, and military personnel who all pretended not to stare at the light moving beneath his skin. Rebecca walked beside him until a security officer tried to stop her. She looked at him once, and he stepped aside. Garrett gave the officer a sympathetic glance. "Good call." They rushed him through bright corridors, past sealed doors, into the deepest medical facility on the station. Machines activated around him. Isolation chambers opened. Diagnostic arms unfolded from the ceiling. Doctors shouted orders as scanners warmed and containment fields rose. Rebecca stood outside the glass as Garrett was guided onto the examination platform. For a moment, their eyes met and he tried to smile. She pressed one hand against the glass as then the medical chamber sealed. Lights swept over Garrett's body as white gold lines beneath his skin flared in answer. And somewhere far beyond Orion Station, in the spaces between stars where ancient things had begun to stir, the darkness noticed the light. Chapter 5 Preemptive. The darkness noticed the light. Not as humans notice things. Not with eyes or sensors or instruments or minds shaped by flesh and time. It noticed him the way a predator in the deep ocean notices blood. Across the spaces between stars, where ancient shadows slip through the folds of reality like smoke through cracks in stone, something stirred. The light had not fully awakened yet. It was young, unstable, incomplete. It burned inside a fragile human body aboard a frontier station, orbiting an ordinary colony world. But it was there, a spark. A mistake that could become a threat. The shadows did not hesitate. They had survived for ages by moving before civilizations understood what was happening. They did not conquer with banners or broadcasts. They did not announce themselves. They erased. They unmade. Their ships were not built like ships of metal and engine and hull. They moved like translucent wounds through space, long and silent, half visible against the stars. Their edges shimmered as though they were not entirely in the universe, their surfaces flowing like liquid darkness over skeletal frames of impossible geometry. 50 of them turned toward Orion Station. 50 shadow vessels, gliding through the galaxy without jump flash, without engine flare, without heat signature. A preemptive strike. Destroy the station. Destroy the human. Destroy the light before it remembered what it was. Garrett pulsed for the first time 12 hours after arriving at Orion Station. He was asleep when it happened. At least the doctors thought he was asleep. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow. His body rested on the medical platform inside the sealed isolation chamber, surrounded by diagnostic machines, containment rings, and armored glass. Then the white gold lines beneath his skin flared, and the entire chamber lit up. Every monitor screamed. For 1 second, Garrett's body released more energy than the station's primary reactor produced in a full minute. Then it stopped. Outside the chamber, doctors, scientists, military officers, and station command personnel stood frozen. Rebecca was there because she had not left. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her eyes were red from exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back poorly, strands falling loose around her face. No one had been able to convince her to sleep. No one had been able to convince her to step away from the glass. Inside the chamber, Garrett remained still as the lead physician, Dr. Voss, stared at the readouts. "That was impossible," he whispered. Admiral Helena Rourke, commander of Orion Station, stood behind him with her arms folded. She was a small woman in her late 50s, gray hair cropped short, face lined by decades of command decisions. Orion Station was not the largest military facility humanity possessed, but it was one of the most important on the frontier. She had responsibility for the station, the colony below, every ship in orbit, and every soul under her protection. She did not like impossible things happening inside her medical wing. "Define impossible," she said. Dr. Voss looked back at her. His body just emitted a controlled energy pulse, equivalent to a tactical reactor surge. There was no source, no fuel, no thermal buildup, no organ damage, and no radiation burn. Rebecca pressed closer to the glass. "Is he hurt?" Voss hesitated. That hesitation nearly broke her. "Doctor," she said firmly, as though trying to wake him from a dream. "He appears stable," Voss said quickly. "But I do not understand how." Then Garrett pulsed again. This time the lights across the entire medical deck dimmed, and a wave of white gold light rolled through the isolation chamber, pushed against the containment fields, and vanished. The glass vibrated as the floor trembled beneath their boots. One of the scientists stumbled back from her console. "Energy output doubled, sir." Admiral Rourke's jaw tightened. "How long between pulses?" 11 minutes, Voss said with an uneasy look. The next came in 9. Then 7. Then 5. With every pulse, Garrett grew stronger as the light beneath his skin no longer moved like veins. It moved like circuitry written by God, branching across his chest, shoulders, arms, throat, and face in luminous patterns that shifted with each breath. His body remained human but changed, refined, sharpened. Something in him had been rewritten on a level no scanner could fully map. His bones were denser. His muscles carried impossible charge. His neural activity no longer looked biological alone. It looked like a storm trying to think. By the 4th hour, Garrett's pulses were shaking the entire medical wing. By the 6th, Orion Station's engineers began reporting power fluctuations from decks nowhere near the quarantine zone. By the 8th, the station's science division stopped pretending this was only a medical issue. They gathered inside Command Conference Room 1, a chamber overlooking the curve of the colony world below. The planet turned peacefully beneath them, unaware that the station above it was holding a man who might be more dangerous than any weapon humanity had ever built. Admiral Rourke stood at the head of the table, and Dr. Voss stood beside a projection of Garrett's energy readings. Rebecca stood near the far wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had been invited because Garrett had asked for her when he was still conscious, and because no one had the heart to remove her. Voss looked pale. "At current growth rate," he said, "the pulses will exceed the containment field's maximum tolerance within 2 hours. An engineer from Station Systems shook his head. "Containment can be reinforced." "Not enough." "We don't know that." "Yes," Voss snapped, voice breaking for the first time, "we do." His last pulse exceeded the projected output of a Class 3 dreadnought core. A living human body produced more usable energy than a warship reactor. The next sequence will be stronger. Admiral Rourke looked toward the engineering officer. "Counter-argument?" she asked. The officer hesitated and then said, "We don't understand what we're measuring," he said. "The energy isn't behaving like normal radiation, plasma, fusion output, 0-point leakage, or anything else. It interacts with systems selectively. The pulses dim lights and trip sensors, but they don't cook the air or melt the chamber. It's not behaving like an explosion. Voss turned towards him. That does not make it safe. No, the engineer said. But it means we may be wrong about what happens if containment fails. A military security officer leaned forward. And if we're not wrong? No one answered. The next pulse came through the station. Even from the conference room, they felt it. The lights dimmed. The holographic table flickered. The viewport darkened for half a second as the station's smart glass reacted to the surge. Rebecca closed her eyes. When she opened them, everyone was looking at her. She hated them for it. Admiral Rourke's voice softened slightly. Lieutenant Sloan. Rebecca swallowed and said, "Don't. I have to ask." The Admiral replied, with an understanding look on her face. No, you don't." The Admiral's face became serious. "If Garrett becomes a threat to the station, he is not a threat." She frantically replied, cutting off the Admiral. "If he becomes one," Rourke continued, "we may have to act." Rebecca's hands curled into fists. "You mean kill him?" The word hung in the room because no one corrected her. Dr. Voss looked down. The security officer looked away. But Admiral Rourke did not. "Yes," the Admiral said. "If there is no other way to protect the station and the colony." Rebecca stared at her. "That is Garrett in there. I know." "No, you don't. You know his name. You know his file. You know he's glowing and breaking your machines." "I know him." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "I know the way he talks to engines like they are stubborn dogs. I know the way he burns coffee and pretends it's drinkable. I know he proposed to me by blurting it out like an idiot in front of a campfire because he was too nervous to remember his own speech." The room was silent as Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I know he is still in there." Another pulse hit. This one shook dust from the ceiling seams, and the station alarms began to sound. A tactical officer burst into the room. "Admiral." Rourke turned sharply. "Report. Unknown contacts entering system." The room changed instantly, as grief and argument vanished beneath training. "How many?" Rourke asked. The officer's face was pale. 50. Configuration. Unknown. They aren't reading like conventional ships. Sensor returns are unstable. Translucent hull profiles. No heat signatures. No standard drive emissions. They appeared at the outer system boundary and are moving toward Orion Station. The engineer whispered, the things Garrett said he felt. Rebecca looked at the viewport as stars glimmered beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, the darkness had arrived. Admiral Rourke moved toward the door. "Battle stations. Signal the colony. Get every ship in orbit between those contacts and the station." The tactical officer nodded and ran. Voss grabbed his data slate. "Admiral Garrett's pulses, I am aware. If they continue accelerating, I said I am aware." They hurried toward the medical wing as Orion Station came alive with alarms. The shadow ships crossed the outer defense perimeter without slowing. Human sensor systems could barely lock onto them. They looked like ships one moment and smears of darkness the next. Their hulls passed through debris and dust without disturbance, as if only part of them existed in normal space. Weapons platforms attempted targeting solutions and failed. Missiles launched and lost lock halfway to target. Beam weapons struck and passed through, clipping fragments of shadow without stopping the vessels beneath. The human fleet in orbit was not large. 2 patrol frigates, 1 heavy cruiser, the escort vessel Resolute, and 4 civilian defense cutters hastily armed and crewed by reservists. They formed a defensive line anyway. The first shadow volley tore through them, like night swallowing candles. Not beams or missiles, but black lances that extended from the translucent vessels and cut across space, leaving trails where light itself seemed to die. A defense cutter vanished silently, its hull collapsing inward as if crushed by the absence of reality. 1 patrol frigate lost power and drifted dark. The heavy cruiser fired a full broadside, scoring a glancing hit on 1 shadow vessel that shimmered, twisted, and reformed. Orion Station watched death approach. Inside the medical wing, Garrett's pulses had become faster. 30 seconds apart. Then 20, then 10. Rebecca stood at the glass, both hands pressed against it. "Garrett," she whispered, "wake up." The white gold light beneath his skin flared with every pulse now. His body lifted slightly from the medical platform, not by machinery, but by the force building inside him. His hair drifted as if underwater. The air inside the chamber shimmered. Dr. Voss shouted over the alarms. Containment failure in 3 minutes. Admiral Rourke stood with her sidearm drawn but lowered. Rebecca saw it and her heart stopped. No. Rourke's face was carved from pain and duty. "If he detonates." "He won't." "You don't know that." Rebecca turned on her. "Neither do you." Another pulse hit, and the medical wing lost power for 2 full seconds. Emergency lights came back red, as Garrett's pulses no longer struck like waves. They became a rhythm, then a vibration, then a continuous stream. The glow beneath his skin intensified until the glass darkened automatically. The containment field screamed under the load. Scientists backed away from their stations. Voss shielded his face. Then everything stopped, no pulse. No alarms from the chamber, and no light surge. Garrett dropped gently back onto the platform as the white gold lines across his body dimmed to a steady glow. For 1 impossible second, there was only silence. Then Garrett opened his eyes. They were gold. Not glowing like a lamp, but burning like sunrise through storm clouds. He sat up, and every weapon in the room lifted toward him. Garrett looked around slowly and saw the doctors, the soldiers, Admiral Rourke, the sidearm in her hand, the fear in every face. Then he saw Rebecca, and his expression changed. The ancient weight in his eyes softened into something heartbreakingly familiar. He smiled and winked. "Hey, Becca." She sobbed once, half laugh, half relief. "Garrett." She asked. He stood. Dr. Voss stumbled back. "You shouldn't be able to." Garrett turned toward the outer wall. Beyond it were decks, armor, vacuum, orbit, the colony world, and 50 shadow vessels tearing through human defenses. "I know," Garrett said. His voice was different now. Still his, but layered with something vast and luminous beneath it. "I know what they are." Admiral Rourke raised her weapon fully. Garrett Hale stand down. He looked at her. Not angrily. Almost kindly. "No time, Admiral." Then he walked through the wall. Not breaking it or smashing it, but just walking through it. His body became light for the length of a step, passing through reinforced alloy, insulation, outer hull, and station armor as if they were mist. For 1 brief instant, his glowing silhouette was visible inside the wall itself. Then he was gone. Rebecca ran to the glass. Outside Orion Station, a human figure appeared in vacuum. No suit or tether, no ship. Garrett floated between the station and the attacking shadows, white gold light burning beneath his skin. The station lights dimmed. Not fully, not catastrophically, but everywhere at once, light bent toward him. Corridor lamps dimmed. Running lights softened. Reactor glow flickered. Even the shield emitters along the station's hull pulsed as Garrett drew from them, not stealing enough to kill the station, only enough to begin. Then he reached farther, toward the system's star. A line of sunlight bent. Everyone on Orion Station saw it. A thin golden stream stretching across space from the distant sun toward Garrett. Then another. Then thousands. Light gathered around him in spirals, pouring into orbit, wrapping around his body in expanding rings. The shadow ships changed course, and for the first time they hesitated. Garrett lifted one hand and the light hardened, then white crystal formed in space. At first it was only a blade-like structure around him, translucent and radiant. Then armor grew from it, a prow, a spine. Wings of luminous metal. Cannon-like shapes formed along the sides, not built by hands but imagined into being by power older than stars. A dreadnought formed around Garrett. A ship of light that was not human. It was not ancient either. Not fully. It was something between memory and will, a massive warship of white crystal metal and golden fire, with Garrett at its heart. Its hull gleamed like dawn forged into armor. Its edges were sharp but beautiful. Lines of light ran along its surface like veins. Vast wings unfolded from its sides, and at its tip, a lance of concentrated radiance began to burn. The human defenders stopped firing. They could only watch. The ship of light moved with no engine flare. No thrust. It simply advanced. The shadows fired first as the black lances struck the luminous dreadnought and vanished against its hull. Not absorbed. Not deflected, unmade. The darkness burned away where it touched the light, dissolving into sparks like ash in wind. Garrett answered with a beam of white-gold radiance from the front of the lightship and struck the nearest shadow vessel. The ship screamed, not through speakers but through space. Its translucent hull twisted, trying to fold away from reality, but the light held it in place. Cracks of gold spread through the darkness. Then the shadow ship shattered into fragments of fading night. Garrett turned and shot another beam. Another shadow ship died. Then the battle became motion. The 50 shadow vessels scattered, moving like smoke, phasing in and out of normal space. Garrett followed them effortlessly. Light streamed behind his dreadnought in long wings. Golden lances cut through shadow hulls. Crystal guns along the ship's sides fired bursts of condensed dawn. Every strike burned. Every hit mattered. The shadows had come to destroy him before he became whole, but they were too late. One vessel tried to slip past him toward Orion Station, but Garrett's lightship blurred across its path. He struck it with the prow, and the shadow ship split apart around the impact, its darkness peeling away from the contact point like rotten cloth. Another 3 coordinated their fire, black lances converging on the same point of the luminous hull. Garrett drew more sunlight and the ship brightened. The response was immediate and final. 3 golden spears launched from the lightship and pierced all 3 attackers at once. They hung in space for a moment, pinned by radiance, then collapsed inward and vanished. The battle lasted less than 7 minutes. 50 shadow ships entered the system, but none left. The last tried to flee toward the outer boundary, its translucent hull flickering wildly as it attempted to slip between dimensions. Garrett raised one hand from within the heart of the lightship, and a circle of radiance opened ahead of the fleeing vessel. The shadow ship struck it and stopped dead. Then the light closed around it, and when the glow faded, only empty space remained. The luminous dreadnought turned back toward Orion Station, and for a moment, all of humanity's weapons were still aimed at it. No one gave the order to fire. No one dared. The ship of light began to dissolve. Its wings folded inward. Its crystal hull became streams of gold and white. Armor became mist. The vast prow unraveled into ribbons of light that flowed back toward Garrett's body. Then he was only a man again, floating in vacuum. He passed through the station hull as easily as he had left and inside the medical wing. Light gathered near Rebecca. Garrett stepped out of it barefoot, shirtless, still glowing faintly, but human in shape once more. Rebecca ran to him, but this time, no one tried to stop her. She threw her arms around him, and he caught her carefully, as if afraid he might break the world if he held too tightly. For a second, the ancient power in him seemed to quiet under the simple weight of her against his chest. "You idiot," she whispered, crying into him. He gave a tired smile. "I'm noticing a theme." She pulled back just enough to look at his face. "What are you?" Garrett looked past her. Admiral Rourke, Dr. Voss, the scientists, soldiers, and station officers all stared at him. He took a slow breath and said, "I'm still Garrett." His eyes lifted toward the stars beyond the viewport. "But I remember now." No one spoke, then Garrett's voice grew quieter. The stories were wrong because they were too small. The war between light and darkness wasn't myth. It happened, it's still happening. The shadows were driven back, but never destroyed. They've been hiding between galaxies, feeding on fear, turning species against each other, preparing to return. Dr. Voss whispered, "For how long?" Garrett looked at him. "Hundreds of thousands of years." The room seemed to shrink around those words. Rebecca still held his hand, and Garrett squeezed it gently. "They came here because they felt me wake up. They wanted to kill me before I became what I'm supposed to be." Admiral Rourke found her voice. "And what is that?" Garrett looked toward the empty space where 50 shadow ships had died. His expression was no longer confused, no longer afraid. "A warrior of light," he said. Then he looked back at Rebecca. "And I don't think I'm the only one they are afraid of." Chapter 6: The Forge Moon. Garrett stood before the emergency command staff of Orion Station, still glowing faintly beneath his skin. No one in the room spoke. Not Admiral Rourke. Not Dr. Voss. Not the military officers. Not the scientists. Not the security personnel who had watched 50 impossible shadow ships enter the system, and then watched one man erase them from existence in less than 7 minutes. Rebecca stood beside him, one hand wrapped tightly around his. She had not let go since he returned, and Garrett could feel her pulse through her fingers. Fast, frightened, alive. He focused on that because it helped keep him human. The conference room had been converted into an emergency briefing chamber. Holographic displays floated above the central table, showing fragments of the battle. Shadow ships moving like smoke through space, Garrett's body leaving the station lights dimming as he drew energy, the star bending its radiance toward him, and then the impossible dreadnought of white crystal and gold fire forming around him in orbit. No one had replayed the footage more than once. Once had been enough. Admiral Rourke stood at the head of the table, her arms folded across her chest. She was not easily shaken. Garrett could see that. Even now, after everything, her mind was still working, still sorting fear into questions and questions into command priorities. "You said the war between light and darkness was real," she said. Garrett nodded, "Yes. And that it has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. Longer than that, depending on how you measure time." Dr. Voss rubbed a hand over his face. That is not a helpful clarification. No, Garrett said. It really isn't. One of the military intelligence officers leaned forward and asked him to start from the beginning. Garrett looked toward the viewport and outside. Orion Station glowed against the colony world below. Repair drones moved across damaged sections of the outer hull. Defense ships patrolled in tight formation. The stars looked peaceful again. But now Garrett could feel what waited between them. The beginning is older than planets, he said. Older than species. Older than the galaxy. The stories about light and darkness are fragments of something real. The light created. The darkness consumed. They fought before time stabilized, before galaxies formed. The light pushed the darkness back, but it didn't destroy it. The room remained silent. Garrett continued. The darkness learned. It couldn't win by open force, so it hid. It slipped into the spaces between galaxies, between dimensions, between thoughts. It waited. It whispered. It nudged civilizations toward fear, suspicion, hatred, and war. Admiral Rourke's face tightened. The disappearances. Yes, Garrett said. Ships vanishing. Border colonies attacked. Species accusing each other. The shadows were testing the galaxy, weakening trust, making sure everyone would be divided when they came. A scientist near the far side of the table spoke carefully. And humanity. Garrett looked at him. The answer was inside him now, not as memory exactly, but as certainty. Something the sphere had awakened. Something placed deep in humanity's ancient design, like a seed waiting for fire. Humanity was created for this. The room shifted, and several officers exchanged glances. Rebecca's hand tightened around his as Garrett went on. Not by the shadows. Not by accident. Humanity was shaped by the light as a contingency. A failsafe. A species that could adapt quickly, endure suffering, survive contradiction, and still choose to protect something besides itself. Dr. Voss stared at him. You are saying humans were engineered. In a way, Garrett said. Not like machines. Not like laboratory products. More like planted potential. Most of us live and die as ordinary people. We build, fight, love, fail, dream, and stumble through history like anyone else. But if the darkness returns, some humans can become more. Admiral Rourke's voice was low. Warriors of light. Garrett nodded, yes. Another officer looked toward the battle footage. And you are one of them. Garrett hesitated. I'm the first one awake. That sentence landed hard as Rebecca looked at him sharply. First. Garrett turned to her, and the glow beneath his skin dimmed slightly, almost as if the power inside him recognized her before it recognized anyone else. I don't think I'm supposed to be alone. They were finally left alone 2 hours later. Not entirely alone, not really. Orion Station had cameras, sensors, security seals, medical monitors, and more armed personnel nearby than Garrett wanted to think about. But Admiral Rourke had given them a private observation room near the medical wing, with one large window overlooking the colony world below. It was the closest thing to privacy the station could offer. Garrett stood by the glass, watching the curve of the planet beneath them, and Rebecca stood behind him for a while without speaking. He could see her reflection in the window. Exhausted, pale. Still wearing the same clothes from the moon. Still wearing the ring. He looked down at his own hands, and the white gold lines beneath his skin pulsed slowly, steady now. Controlled. They no longer frightened him the way they had at first, but he understood why they frightened everyone else. He was not what he had been, and that truth sat between them. Garrett tried to say something and failed. Rebecca spoke first. "Are you afraid to touch me?" He turned. She stood with her arms folded, watching him with that same sharp, unflinching look she had used on professors, officers, and him whenever he was being especially stupid. Garrett swallowed, "Yes." Her expression softened. "Why?" "Because I don't know what I am yet. You just told half the station what you are. That doesn't mean I understand it." Rebecca stepped closer, and Garrett took one step back without meaning to. Pain flashed across her face. He hated himself for it. "Becca." "No," she said. "Don't do that. I could hurt you." "You haven't." "I walked through a station wall. I built a ship out of sunlight. I destroyed 50 things that may not even fully exist in our dimension. I don't know what happens if I lose control." Rebecca crossed the distance between them, and Garrett froze. She stopped inches away. "You came back to me." His throat tightened. "That was the only thing I knew how to do." For a moment, neither moved until Rebecca threw her arms around him. Garrett stiffened at first, every part of him terrified that the power inside him might flare, might burn, might do something beyond his control. But nothing terrible happened. Rebecca pressed herself against him, holding him like she had been holding herself together by force, and had finally decided she was allowed to break. Slowly, carefully, Garrett wrapped his arms around her. She was warm and real, alive. He closed his eyes. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "You didn't. I thought that thing took you." "It changed me," he said. "But it didn't take me." Rebecca pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were wet but fierce. "Good," she said. Then she kissed him. It was not careful, and she didn't hesitate. It was relief, fear, love, anger, and refusal all at once. Garrett held her, and for the first time since the cave, he let himself stop fighting the light inside him. That was the mistake. Or maybe it was destiny. The white gold lines beneath Garrett's skin flared. Rebecca gasped against him. Garrett pulled back immediately. "Becca." Light moved between them. Not from him to her like an attack. Not like infection. It bloomed where their hands touched, where her chest pressed against his, where her lips had met his. A thin line of gold curled across her wrist. Rebecca stared at it as Garrett backed away. The light followed. "No," he said. Rebecca lifted her hand. The golden line pulsed beneath her skin. It did not burn her but answered her. More light appeared along her fingers, then her arms, then the base of her throat. Her eyes widened as white gold radiance spread through her veins, slower than it had through Garrett, but no less powerful. The room lights dimmed. The window darkened automatically, and alarms began outside the door. Garrett reached for her, then stopped himself as Rebecca looked up at him. Her expression was afraid, but not panicked. "Garrett, I'm here," he said. "What's happening?" He knew before the answer formed, because the light knew. "It's choosing you." He said, "Why?" Garrett looked at the ring on her finger, at her hand, at the golden glow spreading beneath her skin. "Because you love me." Rebecca let out a shaky laugh that was almost a sob. "That is the most inconvenient romantic gesture in history." The light intensified. She dropped to one knee, and Garrett caught her before she hit the floor. This time he did not pull away. He held her as the transformation moved through her body. Her skin glowed from within. Her breathing quickened. Her hair lifted slightly in the charged air. White gold lines appeared across her arms, shoulders, and face, not identical to Garrett's, but complementary, like two halves of a pattern written by different hands. She cried out once as Garrett held her tighter. "I've got you," he whispered. Images flickered through the room. Not holograms or memories. Starlight darkness. Ancient battlefields. Warriors forming out of dying suns and galaxies burning at their edges. A moon at the center of the Milky Way. Not a moon, a forge. Rebecca's eyes snapped open. They burned gold. Garrett felt the recognition pass between them. They both knew. Not everything, not yet. But enough. The door burst open. Medical staff, security, and station officers rushed in, then stopped as both Garrett and Rebecca rose to their feet, glowing with the same white-gold power. Admiral Rourke arrived seconds later. She looked from Garrett to Rebecca. "Oh hell," she said. Rebecca blinked, still dazed. "Admiral," she said, voice layered with new resonance, "we need to leave." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Leave where?" Garrett looked toward the stars. The galactic core. They did not take a human ship. There was no time, and no human vessel could reach the place quickly enough. Instead, Garrett and Rebecca walked out of Orion Station together. Not through the airlock, but through the outer hull. This time, the station did not panic as badly. It still panicked, but less. They emerged into space hand in hand, two human figures wrapped in gold-white light. Orion Station dimmed around them as they drew a little power from its lights, not enough to harm it, only enough to begin shaping the structure around them. Then they reached toward the colony star, and the light came. Not violently. Not like the first time. This was smoother, controlled by two minds instead of one. Streams of sunlight arced across space, gathering around Garrett and Rebecca in spirals. Crystal formed. White metal hardened. A small vessel took shape around them, sleek and luminous, large enough for two, shaped almost like a spearhead of dawn. A ship of light. It had no engines in any human sense, no reactor. No cockpit. Only will, radiance, and purpose. Inside, Garrett and Rebecca stood in a chamber formed around them, walls like transparent crystal filled with moving starlight. They could see Orion Station outside, the colony below, the stars ahead. Rebecca looked around. "This is going to take some getting used to." Garrett glanced at her. "You're handling it better than I did." "You followed a glowing cave ball," she said with a teasing voice. "Are you ever going to let that go?" "No." "That's fair," he admitted. The little ship turned toward the center of the Milky Way, and then space opened. Not jump space and not fold space, but something older. A path made of light unfolded between stars, visible only to them, cutting across distances that would have taken ordinary ships months, years, or lifetimes. Garrett reached for Rebecca's hand as she took it. Together they moved, and the galaxy blurred. Stars became rivers and nebulae became curtains of color. Civilizations passed beneath them in flashes. The shining glass fleets of the Vair, the armored bastions of the Carthun, the ocean worlds of the Aurelian choirs, the trade lanes of the Mavrin, the countless small planets that had no idea an ancient war was waking around them. And finally, they reached the core. The heart of the Milky Way blazed before them. Stars crowded so densely that darkness seemed almost impossible. Radiation storms twisted between ancient suns. Gravity bent light into shimmering arcs. Dead worlds drifted near newborn ones. The entire region felt alive with pressure, power, and danger. And there, orbiting a dim red star near the edge of a dense stellar cluster, was a moon. At least that was what every civilization's charts called it. A barren moon. Unimportant, airless, pale gray, too small to colonize, too poor in resources to mine, too ordinary to deserve attention. Garrett and Rebecca knew better as their ship of light approached. The moon awoke. At first it was subtle. Lines of white-gold fire appeared across the surface, tracing ancient seams beneath dust and stone. Then whole continents of rock shifted. Mountains split open along perfect geometric lines. Craters unfolded like petals. The surface peeled back in enormous plates, revealing structures beneath. Towers, docks, luminous trenches, vast chambers, and kilometer-wide construction rings buried under ages of disguise. The moon was not a moon but a shipyard. A forge hidden at the core of the galaxy that had been waiting since, before the younger civilizations climbed from their oceans. Waiting for humans. Waiting for warriors of light. The small vessel carried Garrett and Rebecca into one of the opening bays. It passed through a curtain of radiance and settled on a platform made from white crystal metal. Around them, the forge moved with impossible grace. No workers appeared. No machines in the human sense. The shipyard itself was alive, with purpose, and light flowed through channels carved into the walls. Vast arms unfolded from the ceiling, not mechanical but crystalline, growing and reshaping as needed. Construction frames rose from the floor. Fields of energy formed hull patterns in the air. Streams of stellar light poured in from the surrounding stars, captured, focused, and shaped. Two ships began to form. His was heavier, broader through the spine, with a blade-like prow and vast radiant cannons along the forward structure. It looked like a dreadnought imagined by the sunrise itself. White crystal armor over luminous gold veins, wings of light folded along its sides, and a central core that answered to his heartbeat. Rebecca's ship was sleeker, faster, elegant but deadly. Its hull curved like a spear of polished dawn, with crescent-like fins and crystalline emitters arranged in graceful arcs. Where Garrett's ship felt like a shield and hammer, hers felt like a blade and song. Rebecca stared and said, "That one's mine." Garrett looked at the forming vessel. "Yeah." He confirmed. "It's prettier than yours." She giggled. "Mine has more cannons," he responded. "That sounds exactly like something you'd say." The forge completed them in minutes, or perhaps time behaved differently there. When Garrett stepped into his ship, he did not enter through a hatch. The hull opened for him, like light recognizing light. The interior formed around his body. Controls were not buttons or screens, but thought, instinct, and memory. The ship responded before he fully understood what he wanted. Rebecca entered hers the same way. Across the shared light link between them, Garrett felt her presence. Warm and sharp. Amused and not afraid. "Determined, Garrett," she said. He smiled. "I hear you. This is extremely strange, yep. Also incredible, also yep." The forge moon brightened behind them, its ancient systems fully awake now. More docks opened. More frames unfolded. It was ready to build fleets. But first, the galaxy had to be warned. Garrett and Rebecca launched from the shipyard together. Two vessels of light rose from the false moon and turned away from the core. They did not go to war yet. They went to speak. The Galactic Council was in session when two unidentified ships appeared outside its defensive perimeter. The Council Station, an immense orbital structure built by the older civilizations of the Milky Way, immediately raised shields. Defense fleets moved into position. The Vayer glass ships angled their crystalline weapons. Carthun cruisers powered their heavy guns. Aurelian harmonic vessels began defensive resonance patterns. Mavran escorts scattered from the central lanes. Then the two ships transmitted human identification codes. That caused more confusion than reassurance, because human ships were not supposed to look like that. Human ships were clunky, bolted, crude. Charming, perhaps, in a primitive way, but not like this. Not radiant vessels of white crystal and living gold, glowing with enough energy to make council sensors fail one after another. Garrett and Rebecca appeared as holograms before the assembled civilizations, and the chamber fell silent. Every species saw the same thing. Two humans, but changed. Their eyes glowed faintly gold. White gold lines pulsed beneath their skin. They stood not as diplomats, not as cadets, not as members of the ignored species at the bottom of the ladder, but as something ancient wearing human faces. Garrett spoke first. "My name is Garrett Hale of Earth." Rebecca stood beside him. "My name is Rebecca Sloan." Garrett looked across the council chamber, at the great civilizations that had dismissed humanity for generations. The disappearances across your borders were not caused by rival species. The attacks were not piracy, sabotage, or political betrayal. They were the first movements of the shadows. A roar of confusion spread through the chamber. Garrett raised one hand, and the room brightened. Not enough to harm anyone, but enough to silence. Rebecca continued. "The war your oldest myths barely remember is returning. Light and darkness are real. The shadows are real. They have been weakening you, turning you against one another, preparing to enter the galaxy in force." A Carthun warlord stood. "Why should we believe humans?" Rebecca's gold eyes turned toward him. "Because 50 shadow ships attacked Orion Station to kill Garrett before he awakened." Garrett added, "And because they failed." The council chamber fell quieter. Garrett looked to the human delegation seated far out in the lower galleries, where humanity had always been placed, and their faces showed shock, fear, pride, and disbelief. He softened slightly. "Earth needs to know what's coming. All of humanity does. But so do the rest of you. This war won't care about your rankings, your old grudges, or your galactic ladders." His voice deepened. "The shadows are coming for everyone." Rebecca stepped forward. "We are going to the edge beyond the galaxy. We are going to find where they gather. And we are going to push them out before they can pour into the Milky Way." A Vayer crystalline elder shimmered with pale light and asked, "You intend to confront the darkness alone?" Garrett glanced at Rebecca, and she gave him a look. The kind of look she had given him when he suggested naming a moon after her. He smiled faintly. "No," Garrett said. "Not alone." Rebecca looked toward the projection of the hidden Forge moon, now appearing above the council floor. The light left us a shipyard. The chamber erupted again, but this time not only in fear, in awe, in possibility. Garrett looked past them all, toward the stars beyond the council station. He could feel the darkness moving, far away. Gathering. Waiting. Not for long. He turned back to the council. "Tell your fleets to stay clear, unless they are ready to fight a war older than their civilizations." Rebecca's hand found his. Garrett squeezed it once. Then the two ships of light turned from the Galactic Council and opened a path toward Earth. They had to warn their people, and they had to wake what humanity had been created to become. And after that, they would fly beyond the edge of the Milky Way and confront the shadows in the dark between galaxies. Chapter 7: The Chosen. The ships of light arrived above Earth without warning. That was not how Garrett intended it. He had meant to approach properly. Transmit identification. Follow military orbital protocol. Give Earth's defense network time to recognize him before he appeared above the planet in a vessel made of white crystal metal and living gold. But the ship did not move like a human ship. It did not coast through orbital lanes. It did not request clearance from traffic control. It did not burn fuel, vent heat, or broadcast engine signatures. It simply opened a path through light, crossed impossible distance, and emerged above Earth as if the universe had folded politely out of its way. Rebecca's ship appeared beside his. Two radiant vessels hovering above humanity's home world, but within seconds, every defense satellite in orbit locked onto them. Then the entire Earth defense grid went to maximum alert, and Garrett winced as the warning channels exploded. "Well," Rebecca said through the light link between their ships, "that could have gone smoother." "I was trying to be subtle," he said. "You arrived over Earth in a glowing alien battleship. It's technically not alien." Garrett, "Fine," he said, "it's a little alien." A dozen military challenges hit them at once. Automated systems demanded identification. Orbital platforms charged weapons. Lunar Defense Command sent warnings. The shipyards around Mars began shifting to combat readiness. Garrett opened a full-spectrum channel. "This is Garrett Hale of Earth Exploration Service, formerly assigned to the Horizon's Edge. Rebecca Sloan is with me. We need immediate command contact with Earth Defense." For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then a voice answered. "This is Admiral Thomas Rayner of Earth Defense Command. Garrett Hale is currently listed under medical quarantine at Orion Station. Identify yourself or be fired upon." Garrett glanced toward Rebecca. She raised an eyebrow. "Understandable," she said. Garrett sighed and opened a visual channel. His image appeared before Earth Defense Command. He wore no uniform now. Not exactly. The ship had formed something around him that resembled armor and clothing both. Dark human fabric threaded with white gold light, fitted like a pilot's suit but luminous beneath the seams. His eyes glowed faintly gold. Thin radiant lines traced his neck, hands, and face. Rebecca appeared beside him in the linked transmission, changed in the same way, beautiful and terrifying, with white gold patterns moving beneath her skin like captured starlight. Admiral Rayner stared at them from the command center on Earth. He was an older man, sharp-eyed, with a shaved head, gray beard, and a face built by decades of hard decisions. Behind him, officers moved across a vast underground command chamber filled with tactical displays, orbital maps, and flashing alert markers. "Garrett Hale," Rayner said slowly. "Yes, sir." Rayner looked from him to Rebecca. "Lieutenant Sloan." "Yes, Admiral," Rebecca replied. Rayner leaned forward slightly. "What the hell happened to you two?" Garrett looked past the Admiral, toward the blue curve of Earth below him. "That's going to take some explaining." They told him everything. Not over an open channel. Garrett and Rebecca brought their ships to a secured orbital distance, still surrounded by wary defense platforms, and projected themselves into Earth Defense Command in full holographic form. Their physical bodies remained aboard their ships, but their images stood inside the command chamber like ghosts made of stars. Admiral Rayner listened without interruption. That alone told Garrett the man was more dangerous than he looked. Garrett explained the cave on the moon and the sphere. Orion Station, the shadow attack, and the forge moon hidden near the galactic core. The Galactic Council warning they had delivered. Rebecca filled in what Garrett missed. She always did. Her words were sharper, cleaner, more precise. She explained the Shadow's tactics, their ability to move between dimensions, the way they had been manipulating galactic tensions, the likely reason they struck before Garrett's transformation was complete. When they finished, the command chamber was silent. Admiral Rayner stood with both hands behind his back, staring at the rotating image of the galaxy above the central table. At last, he said, "You are telling me humanity was created as a weapon." Garrett shook his head and said, "No, sir. Not a weapon." Rayner turned toward him as Garrett searched for the right words. "A failsafe, a choice. The light didn't make us soldiers. It made us capable of becoming them if the universe needed us to." One of the science officers spoke from the lower level. "And who decides who becomes one of these warriors?" Before Garrett could answer, every light in the command chamber dimmed. A pulse moved through the room. Not from Garrett or Rebecca, but from Earth. For one impossible moment, every screen, every lamp, every holographic projector, every city light visible in orbital feeds seemed to bend inward towards something invisible. Not losing power. Responding. Garrett felt it. Rebecca felt it too. The light was searching. Across Earth, across Luna, across Mars, across orbital habitats, colony domes, asteroid stations, and distant human settlements, something ancient and luminous moved through humanity like wind through a forest. It did not judge rank, nor did it choose by bloodline, wealth, education, beauty, strength, or fame. It searched for something deeper. Adaptability and courage. Protective instinct and love. The willingness to stand between darkness and another living soul. The first person chosen was a nurse in Nairobi who had carried children out of a burning hospital during a reactor accident. The second was a mechanic on Ceres who had once sealed himself inside a radiation compartment to keep a mining habitat alive. The third was a schoolteacher from rural Canada who had shielded her students during a terrorist attack. Then a Marine, a farmer, a rescue pilot and a poet, a widowed father, a teenage cadet on Luna who had not yet fired a weapon in anger, but had once risked his life to save a stranger trapped outside an airlock. Across human space, 500 people began to glow. Some screamed, some prayed, some thought they were dying, and some stood perfectly still because some deep part of them knew. Earth Defense Command filled with emergency reports. Unidentified light phenomenon in Nairobi. Orbital Habitat 12 reporting one resident surrounded by luminous energy. Mars Colony Medical Center requesting immediate support. Luna Academy reports 3 cadets transforming. Ceres Station has 2 and Europa has 1. Admiral, this is happening everywhere. Rayner looked at Garrett, and Garrett's golden eyes were fixed on the galaxy map. "It's choosing them," he said. Rebecca whispered, 500. Rayner's expression hardened. "You know that number." Garrett nodded. "I can feel them." The Admiral absorbed that, and then he said the only thing a human commander could say. "Bring them in." The next 24 hours became the strangest mobilization in human history. There was no public explanation at first. There could not be. Governments barely understood what was happening. Earth Defense Command issued emergency medical retrieval orders, then immediately reclassified them as military escort operations, then reclassified them again as cosmic threat response protocols because nobody had a better category. 500 chosen humans were brought to orbital stations under guard, though the guards quickly learned their weapons were mostly symbolic. Not one of the chosen tried to run. That unsettled the command staff almost as much as the glowing. They arrived confused, frightened, and changed. Some still wore hospital scrubs, work overalls, academy uniforms, colony pressure suits, sleep clothes, religious garments, mining gear, or civilian coats hastily thrown over luminous skin. White gold lines moved beneath them all. Some glowed faintly. Others pulsed like rising stars. Garrett and Rebecca met them aboard Earth's primary orbital defense station. They stood in a hangar large enough to hold 3 cruisers, watching shuttles arrive one after another. A woman from Nairobi stepped down first, still wearing her nurse's uniform beneath a borrowed military jacket. Light glowed along her hands as she looked at Garrett. "You know what's happening to me?" Garrett nodded. "I know some of it. Will it hurt?" "No," Rebecca said gently. "Not after the change settles." The woman looked at Rebecca's glowing eyes, then Garrett's. "Are we still human?" Garrett answered without hesitation, "Yes." That became the first thing he told every one of them. "Yes. You are still human. You are changed, but you are still you. You are not alone." By the time all 500 had gathered, the hangar glowed like a sunrise trapped inside steel. Admiral Rayner came in person. He stood before them in full uniform, his face stern but his eyes carrying the weight of what he had already agreed to do. Behind him, hundreds of officers, medics, scientists, and soldiers watched from observation galleries. Rayner looked over the chosen. Not all were soldiers, and that was obvious immediately. Some were old enough to have grandchildren. Some were barely adults. Some stood straight with military discipline. Others held themselves like teachers, workers, doctors, parents, pilots, engineers, artists, and ordinary people who had woken up glowing and been told the universe was at war. The admiral took a long breath. "I won't pretend I understand this," he said. "I won't pretend any of us do. But I've seen the footage from Orion Station. I've seen what came for us. I've seen what Garrett Hale and Rebecca Sloan became when humanity needed them." He paused. "And now it seems humanity needs all of you." No one spoke. Rayner continued. "You are not being ordered into this. Not by me. Not by Earth Defense. Not by any government. If you choose to step away, we will protect you as best we can." Garrett felt the 500 hearts in the hangar. Afraid and confused. But steady. No one stepped away. Rayner seemed to understand before the silence ended. He nodded once. Then God helped the shadows. Garrett turned toward Rebecca. She took his hand and together, they opened the path. The 500 did not travel aboard shuttles. The light would not allow it. Above Earth's orbital defense station, a great ring of radiance formed. It spun in silence, white and gold, bending sunlight from the star and focusing it into a doorway. The chosen rose from the hangar floor, not by force, but as if gravity had quietly released them. Some laughed in disbelief as cried. One elderly man whispered, "Well, that's new." Garrett and Rebecca rose with them. The station crew watched through viewports and external cameras as 502 human figures ascended into space, wrapped in light. Then they vanished. They crossed the galaxy faster than any ship could follow. The path of light carried them through rivers of stars, across nebulae, past sleeping worlds and ancient borders, into the crowded brilliance of the galactic core. When they arrived at the hidden Forge moon, the ancient shipyard was already awake. Its surface had unfolded since Garrett and Rebecca had last been there. More of the false moon's crust had peeled back, revealing colossal construction valleys, radiant towers, orbital docks, and crystalline foundries that reached from the surface into space like frozen lightning. Rivers of captured starlight poured through channels carved across the moon's body. The 500 chosen hovered above it in awe, and the shipyard began to build. Not slowly. Not like human shipyards. It did not weld plates or assemble frames piece by piece. It grew vessels from light and crystal metal, shaping each one according to the soul of the warrior who would command it. A former rescue pilot received a fast, narrow ship with sweeping wings of gold, built for speed and interception. The nurse from Nairobi received a luminous cruiser with broad shield structures, a vessel that seemed designed to protect others first and strike second. A Marine received a compact warship covered in radiant armor, brutal and direct. A teacher received a vessel with wide sensor arcs and harmonic emitters, a ship meant to coordinate, guide, and shield. The mechanic from Ceres received a heavily built craft whose interior systems seemed to rearrange themselves constantly, eager for repair, invention, and improvisation. 500 ships formed, but no two were identical. All were beautiful, and all were dangerous. Garrett and Rebecca watched from the command chamber of Garrett's larger vessel, which had grown and changed since its first creation. It was no longer only his. The ship had made room for Rebecca beside him, forming a shared space between their linked vessels. Their two ships could separate when needed, but at rest, they joined into one larger command craft, half shield, half blade, heavy with radiant cannons and elegant with crescent wings of light. They stood before a vast transparent wall, looking out across the forge moon as the fleet took shape. Below them, ships rose one by one from construction cradles of white fire. Rebecca stood in front of Garrett, leaning back against his chest. His arms circled her carefully, though he no longer feared touching her. The light inside them recognized itself now. When their hands met, the glow beneath their skin synchronized in slow, steady pulses. For a while neither spoke. The sight was too large. 500 human lives had changed forever because the universe had decided it needed them. Garrett rested his chin lightly against the top of Rebecca's head. "I wish we had more time," he said. Rebecca placed her hands over his. "For what?" "To train them. Prepare them. Explain more. Let them be scared, without immediately asking them to save the galaxy." Rebecca looked out at the forming fleet. They were chosen because they already know how to stand when they're scared. Garrett smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you rehearsed." "It did sound good, didn't it?" "Very official. I'm practicing for when I outrank you." She giggled. "You already outrank me emotionally." "Correct." He laughed softly. For one fragile moment, they were back beside the campfire on the moon. Back before the cave. Before the sphere. Before the shadows. Before the forge moon, and the war older than civilization. Just Garrett and Rebecca, holding each other while the stars watched. Then Rebecca turned in his arms and looked up at him. "Are you afraid?" Garrett did not lie. "Yes, good." He blinked and asked, "Good. If you weren't, I'd be worried." He brushed a thumb gently along her cheek, where golden lines glowed beneath her skin. "I keep thinking about that night. The campfire. The proposal. The terrible proposal that was heartfelt and sudden. But it worked." She smiled. "It did." His expression softened. "I wanted a life with you." Rebecca touched his chest, over the light pulsing beneath his skin. "You still have one. This isn't exactly what I pictured." "No," she said. "But it's ours." Below them, the last of the 500 ships rose from the forge. The fleet assembled in orbit around the false moon, glowing against the crowded stars of the galactic core. 500 vessels of light, each carrying a human chosen not by rank or power, but by the shape of their heart under pressure. Garrett felt them through the light link. Fear, wonder, and determination. Rebecca felt them too, as her hand found his. "It's time." Garrett nodded. The command craft turned toward the edge of the galaxy. Behind them, the fleet aligned. 500 ships moved as one. The forge moon dimmed slightly, its work complete for now, though thousands of empty docks remained open and waiting. The ancient shipyard had built the first army of light in hundreds of thousands of years. Not the largest army, not yet, but enough to begin. Garrett opened a channel across the fleet. Every chosen human heard him. "This is Garrett Hale. I know most of you didn't ask for this. I know some of you are afraid. I am too." Silence answered him. He continued. "The shadows have been hiding between galaxies, feeding on fear, turning civilizations against each other, and waiting for the right moment to come back. That moment is here. If they reach the Milky Way in force, every world burns. Earth, the colonies, the old civilizations. All of it." Rebecca stepped beside him. "But we are not waiting for them to come to us," she said. "We are going to the edge. We are going to meet them in the dark. And we are going to show them what humanity becomes when the light calls." Across the fleet, ships brightened. One by one. Then all at once. 500 stars waking in formation. Garrett looked toward the path ahead. The edge of the galaxy shimmered in his awareness, a distant boundary where the Milky Way's last stars faded into the black between galaxies. And beyond that black, something vast moved. The shadows were gathering. Garrett could feel them, and so could Rebecca. So could every warrior in the fleet. He tightened his grip on the command rail. "Fleet," he said with a steady voice, "move out." The army of light surged forward, and from the galactic core, through rivers of crowded stars, across ancient territories and silent borders, 500 luminous ships accelerated toward the edge of the Milky Way. Civilizations below saw them pass and did not understand what they were witnessing. Some thought they were comets. Some thought they were weapons. Some thought they were gods. They were none of those things. They were human. At the edge of the galaxy, darkness waited. And humanity was coming. Chapter 8: The Edge of Darkness. The shadows had been gathering long before humanity arrived. Beyond the outermost stars of the Milky Way, past the last pale suns and frozen rogue planets, past the dust lanes and broken comet fields that marked the galaxy's fading edge, there was a darkness no telescope could truly map. It was not empty. It waited. It breathed. For hundreds of thousands of years, the shadows had hidden there, in the cold spaces between galaxies where light grew thin and reality itself seemed less certain. They had survived the First War by retreating into the places creation did not fully reach. They had wrapped themselves in silence, fed on fear, and watched the galaxies turn from afar. They knew the light was coming. They had felt Garrett awaken and had felt Rebecca answer. They had felt the hidden forge moon stir at the galactic core, felt its ancient systems ignite after ages of sleep, felt 500 human souls transformed into living weapons of radiance. So the shadows gathered. Their ships clustered in the void beyond the Milky Way, like fragments of night given shape. They were long, translucent things, half visible against the starless dark, their hulls rippling like smoke over bone. Some were small and swift, knife-like hunters that phased in and out of normal space. Others were vast, cathedral-sized horrors with hollow centers that drank the starlight around them. At the heart of their formation moved something larger still, a black leviathan of shifting angles and impossible depth, surrounded by coils of shadow that bent space around it. They did not speak or sing. They did not rally behind banners. The shadows needed no language for hatred. They had one purpose: Kill the light before it could spread. And then across the edge of the galaxy, dawn arrived. Garrett and Rebecca's fleet dropped out of the light path in formation, 500 luminous ships blazing against the black between galaxies. To any civilization watching from far behind, they might have looked like a new constellation appearing at the edge of creation. White crystal hulls with golden veins. Ships shaped not by factories or military doctrine, but by the souls of the humans who commanded them. At the front flew Garrett and Rebecca. Their joined command craft separated as they approached the battlefield. Garrett's ship unfolded into a broad, powerful dreadnought of light, heavy with radiant cannons and shield structures. Rebecca's vessel peeled away from it, sleek and bright, fast as a spear thrown by sunrise. For one brief moment the two ships flew side by side, and through the light link, Garrett felt Rebecca's presence, warm, focused and terrified, though she would never admit. "You ready?" Garrett asked. Her answer came back immediately. "Absolutely not." Despite everything, Garrett smiled. "Me neither." "Good," she said. "That means we're both paying attention." Ahead of them, the Shadow Fleet moved. Not forward, but everywhere. The darkness unfolded, and thousands of ships emerged from the void, far more than Garrett had sensed from a distance. They came from behind dead rocks, from folded pockets of space, from beneath veils of invisibility that collapsed only when the shadows chose to reveal themselves. 500 ships of light faced a swarm that seemed endless. Garrett felt the shock ripple through the fleet, and fear surged across the light link. A rescue pilot whispered a prayer. A former Marine tightened his grip on his ship's controls. The nurse from Nairobi steadied her breathing and moved her shield cruiser into position near the vulnerable rear formations. Garrett opened the fleet channel. "Hold formation." Rebecca's voice followed his, sharp and calm. "Do not chase the small ones. Protect each other. Watch your flanks. They want to separate us." The shadows struck first as black lances cut across the void. The first volley slammed into the forward shields of the human fleet, exploding against radiant barriers in bursts of white and violet fire. Garrett's dreadnought rocked under the impact, but held. Rebecca's ship rolled beneath a shadow beam, answering with a golden arc that sliced through a translucent attacker and burned it from the inside out. Then the battle opened. 500 ships of light surged into the dark. Radiant cannons fired in long, bright spears. Crystal emitters released waves of focused dawn that pushed back clouds of shadow. Smaller light ships darted between the larger vessels, intercepting knife-like shadow craft before they could slip through the formation. The shadows answered with numbers, but they did not fight like ordinary fleets. They did not hold lines or defend territory. They surrounded. They seeped. They appeared behind ships, above them, below them, inside blind spots that should not have existed. They struck at fear as much as armor. Their weapons did not explode. They erased. A hit from a shadow lance left scars where light refused to return. A human ship named Mercy's Hand took a hit along its port wing. The wing darkened, crumbled, and vanished into black ash, and the pilot screamed across the link. The nurse from Nairobi moved in instantly, her shield cruiser expanding a protective dome around the damaged ship. 3 other human vessels formed around them, firing golden bursts into the shadows that tried to finish the kill. Garrett saw it all at once. Too much at once. Every ship, every fear, every wound in the formation. He pushed power into his dreadnought's forward cannons and fired. A line of sunlight tore through a cluster of shadow vessels, turning 5 of them into burning fragments of dissolving night. His ship drove forward, heavy shields flaring as dozens of black lances struck him. "Garrett," Rebecca warned, "don't overextend. I'm clearing the center. You're making yourself a target." "I'm already a target." "Not funny," she said. "Wasn't trying to be." Rebecca's ship flashed past his left side, bright and precise, cutting through a pair of shadow hunters trying to flank him. She moved beautifully, her vessel responding to thought faster than any human machine could have. It curved, struck, vanished behind a glow of its own engines, and reappeared above a shadow frigate, driving a golden spear through its core. For a moment, Garrett forgot to breathe because even in battle, she was stunning. Then the shadows adapted. The black Leviathan at the center of their formation opened. Its hollow core widened like an eye. A pulse of darkness rolled outward. Every ship of light shuddered, and the light link screamed. Pilots cried out as their vessels dimmed. Shields flickered and golden weapons sputtered. Shadow ships surged forward, sensing weakness. Garrett gritted his teeth and forced his ship brighter. "Fleet Titan formation." Rebecca echoed him immediately. "Fall back to paired defense. No one fights alone." But the shadows were already inside the formation. A fast shadow blade slipped through the gap between two human cruisers and drove a black lance through the smaller vessel behind them. The ship burst, not in fire, but in a silent collapse of radiance, its hull folding inward until only a fading golden spark remained. Garrett felt the pilot die, but not as a report. As an absence. He staggered inside his own ship, one hand gripping the command rail. Rebecca felt it too. Her voice came through the link, tight with pain. "Garrett, stay with me." "I felt him." He whispered, "I know." She replied, "I felt him go out." "I know. Keep fighting." More human ships fell. Not many at first. Then too many. One was torn apart by 3 shadow hunters working together. Another vanished when a black vortex opened beneath it and swallowed half its hull. A third rammed a larger shadow craft after losing weapons, detonating in a burst of golden light that took 4 enemies with it. The warriors of light fought with courage that would have shaken the great powers of the Milky Way to their knees. But courage did not change math. They were outnumbered. The shadows had waited for them and prepared. And every minute the battle continued, the fleet of light grew smaller. Garrett's dreadnought punched toward the Leviathan, firing everything it had. Golden beams carved scars across the enormous shadow vessel, but the wounds closed slowly, darkness knitting itself back together. Rebecca saw what he was doing. "Garrett, no. You can't break that thing alone." "Then help me," he said. "I am trying to keep our left flank alive." He looked through the battle haze and saw her ship diving through a swarm of shadow attackers, protecting 3 damaged human vessels trapped near a debris field of frozen rogue ice. She was brilliant. She was too far out. "Rebecca, pull back," he said as panic started to fill him. "Not yet." "Rebecca." "Garrett, if I pull back, they die." Before he could answer, the Leviathan pulsed again. This time the darkness focused through its hollow core and split into dozens of black threads. They lashed across the battlefield, striking not ships but connections. The light link fractured. For one horrifying second, Garrett could not feel the fleet, could not feel the others, could not feel Becca. His ship surged forward, but 3 shadow vessels crashed into his path. He tore one apart with a forward beam, split another with a wing cannon, and rammed through the third, his luminous armor burning away its hull. Then he felt her again. Pain and fear. Rebecca's ship had been hit. A shadow lance had caught her along the starboard side, shearing through the elegant crescent wing and punching into the cockpit chamber. Her ship spun, light bleeding from the wound in long golden streams. Garrett's entire world narrowed to one point: Rebecca. He yelled. Her voice came through broken and full of static. Garrett, another shadow craft struck her. Her ship cracked. The cockpit chamber split open, and Rebecca was thrown into space. Her ship broke apart around her, fragments of white crystal and gold fire scattering into the dark. The protective field around her body flickered. Her light was still there, but weak, pulsing unevenly beneath her skin. She drifted alone in the middle of the battle, tiny, human, and wounded. The shadows turned toward her. Garrett abandoned the fight. No order. No thought, only her. His dreadnought surged toward Rebecca, smashing through incoming fire. Shadow lances struck its hull. Golden armor cracked. Weapons along the sides overloaded and went dark. Garrett did not care. He reached the edge of his own ship and stepped out. The dreadnought continued moving beneath him, but Garrett passed through its hull as light and emerged into open space. The battle raged around him. Ships died and weapons fired. Darkness and radiance tore at each other across the void. Garrett flew through it all as a human-shaped comet of white gold fire. A shadow hunter crossed his path. He raised one hand and burned it apart without slowing. Another fired at him. The beam struck his shoulder and dissolved. He did not feel it. He saw only Rebecca. She spun slowly, unconscious or close to it, one arm limp, blood forming small red spheres that drifted near her face before the light around her burned them away. Her golden lines flickered faintly. Her eyes were closed. Garrett slowed as he reached her. For all the chaos around him, that moment became strangely quiet. He floated toward her through broken crystal and drifting sparks. His hands, still burning with enough power to kill ships, became gentle. He slid one arm behind her shoulders and the other beneath her knees, gathering her against him as carefully as if she were something fragile and sacred. Her head rested against his chest. Her breathing was shallow but there, alive. Garrett pressed his forehead to hers. "Becca," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered. Somehow impossibly she smiled. "Did I?" she breathed with a voice faint. "Win?" Garrett let out a broken laugh that was almost a sob. "Yeah, you won." Her lips barely moved. "Good. Your ship is still uglier." Then her eyes closed. Garrett held her. For 1 second there was no battle. No galaxy, no light. No darkness. Only Rebecca in his arms, wounded because she had tried to save others. Then the grief hit him. It came like a wave breaking through a dam. Love and fear. Rage and loss. The memory of her walking into the academy lecture hall. The first time she smiled at him. Her hand in his under the stars. The ring catching firelight. The way she had thrown her arms around him, even when he was terrified of himself. The way she had followed him into impossibility and never once let him stand alone. Garrett screamed. The sound did not travel through the vacuum. But the light heard. His body ignited, and white gold radiance exploded outward from him in waves, each one brighter than the last. The broken pieces of Rebecca's ship spun away. Shadow vessels recoiled. Human ships across the battlefield felt the surge and turned toward it. Garrett's light grew and grew. It poured from his chest, his eyes, his hands, wrapping around Rebecca without harming her, shielding her inside the center of his anguish. His dreadnought behind him dissolved into streams of radiance and flowed into him. The nearby sunlight bent. Distant starlight answered. Even the fading sparks of fallen human ships rose and joined the storm around him. The shadows understood too late. They had tried to break the light by hurting what he loved. They had only taught it how deeply he could burn. Garrett's scream became silence. The silence became a star. At the edge of the galaxy, a new sun opened. The pulse erupted. It expanded from Garrett in a perfect sphere of white-gold fire, racing across the battlefield faster than any ship could flee. It passed over human vessels like warm dawn, restoring shields, reigniting damaged cores, steadying injured pilots. It passed over the shadows like judgment. Shadow ships burned. Not exploded, burned. Their translucent hulls filled with light from the inside. Their darkness unraveled. The small hunters vanished instantly. Larger vessels split open as golden cracks raced across them. The cathedral ship screamed and dissolved. The black Leviathan tried to fold itself out of reality, but the pulse reached into the fold and dragged it back. For one impossible moment, the Leviathan hung against the glow, vast and terrible. Then Garrett's light pierced its hollow core, and the darkness inside ignited. The Leviathan shattered into a storm of fading ash. The pulse continued outward until it touched every shadow vessel in the system. Then it was gone. Silence returned, and the battlefield was empty of shadows. Human ships drifted in a stunned formation, many damaged but alive. The black between galaxies, once crowded with enemies, had been cleared by a single wave of grief-struck light. Garrett floated at the center of it all. Rebecca in his arms. His glow dimmed slowly, retreating from star-bright agony back into the lines beneath his skin. He looked around. The shadows were gone. Not pushed back, gone. At least not here. At least not now. He didn't feel victory. Only Rebecca's shallow breathing against him. Garrett turned toward the remains of his ship. The dreadnought of light began reforming around him, slower this time, gently. Its hull grew like crystal around both of them, creating a chamber warm with golden light. He carried Rebecca inside and the ship sealed around them, shielding them from vacuum, battle debris, and the stunned silence of the fleet. Garrett laid her on the command platform, which softened beneath her like a bed of light. Golden threads rose from the ship and wrapped around her wounds, not binding but healing. Her breathing steadied. Garrett knelt beside her. "Come on," he whispered. "Don't you dare leave me after insulting my ship." Rebecca stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, still glowing faintly. She looked at him, unfocused but alive. "Still ugly," she whispered. Garrett laughed through tears. He took her hand and pressed it to his lips. "Yeah," he said. "But it got you home." Outside, the surviving fleet of light gathered around them. At the edge of the Milky Way, humanity had won its first true battle against the shadows. But inside Garrett's ship, none of that mattered yet. Rebecca was alive, and for that moment, that was enough. Chapter 9: The Light Returns. Earth saw them before they arrived. Not with old telescopes, not with deep space listening arrays, not with the cold mathematics of orbital defense grids. Humanity saw them because the night side of the planet began to brighten. Across the Pacific, across the mountain ranges of Alaska, across the sleeping cities of Europe, across the desert colonies and orbital elevators and the silver curve of the moon, people looked up and saw new stars moving toward them. At first, there were only a few. Then dozens. Then hundreds. They came from the direction of the galactic edge, slipping through the dark like fragments of dawn returning from war. The fleet of light emerged above Earth in silence, not through violent explosions or roaring engines, but through long ribbons of white-gold radiance that unfolded across orbit like pathways made from sunrise. The ships were beautiful and many were wounded. Some glowed bright and whole, their crystal hulls smooth and radiant, golden veins pulsing beneath white armor. Others limped into formation with shattered wings, dimmed cores, scorched hulls, and broken weapon arcs trailing sparks of light into space. A few had lost entire sections of themselves, and survived only because the warriors inside refused to stop burning. Some did not return at all. Earth understood that immediately. The fleet that had left as 500 did not come back as 500. Orbital traffic froze. Civilian stations dimmed their lights in respect. Defense platforms lowered their targeting systems one by one, not because the ships were harmless, but because every human watching knew they had just returned from something older and worse than war. The ships gathered around Earth like a wounded halo. At the center came Garrett's vessel, broader and more damaged than when it had left. Its hull bore long black scars where shadow weapons had bitten into the light. One side of its radiant armor had cracked, and great streams of gold energy moved through the fractures like blood beneath skin. Beside it flew Rebecca's ship. It was smaller now, still sleek, still elegant but badly wounded. One crescent wing had been rebuilt in flight by the forge light, and it glowed brighter than the rest, newer and raw. Yet it moved steadily beside Garrett's ship, close enough that their fields touched. Below them, Earth turned blue and alive. Above them, the survivors came home. On the primary orbital defense station, every available dock, hangar, medical bay, and emergency platform opened to receive them. The council representatives sent from the great civilizations were already there, gathered under human protection after Garrett and Rebecca's warning. Vayer crystalline diplomats stood beside Carthun warlords, Aurelian harmonic envoys, Mavran trade ministers, and dozens of smaller species who had never imagined themselves waiting together in human orbit. None of them spoke when the fleet arrived. They had seen human ships before, crude vessels of metal, braces, engines, weld lines, and stubborn practicality. These were not those ships. These were something else. And yet somehow they were human too. Garrett and Rebecca came aboard the station together. They did not arrive through a shuttle bay. The station had prepared one anyway, because human procedure had not yet learned what else to do with people who could walk through walls and build ships from sunlight. Instead, light gathered in the central command chamber. It formed first as a vertical line, then widened into a doorway of gold-white fire. Garrett stepped through carrying Rebecca's hand in his. They both looked exhausted. Garrett's face was drawn, his beard rougher than usual, and the glow beneath his skin flickered unevenly. His uniform-like armor of light was cracked in places, dim around the shoulders and chest. He looked less like a god than a man who had been forced to carry too much and had only barely managed it. Rebecca stood beside him, pale but upright, one arm supported by a glowing brace formed from her own ship's light. The golden patterns beneath her skin were weaker than before but steady. Her eyes still burned faintly. Admiral Rayner waited with the command staff. Behind him stood the council representatives. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rayner stepped forward. "How many?" he asked. Garrett's jaw tightened. "Too many." Rebecca answered because Garrett could not. 432 returned. The chamber went silent. Rayner lowered his head. 68 lost. Garrett nodded once. They held the line. No one asked if the battle had been won. They could see it in the surviving ships, in the damage, in the grief wrapped around every returning warrior. They had won, but only because victory had taken its price. The Vayer ambassador shimmered faintly, crystalline body, reflecting the light from Garrett and Rebecca. "You destroyed the Shadow Fleet." Garrett looked at him. That one fleet. The answer chilled the room. The ambassador's inner light dimmed. Rebecca stepped forward slightly. They were gathering outside the galactic edge. Thousands of them. We stopped that force, but the shadows are not gone. They have been hiding for hundreds of thousands of years. They have more places to hide. Rayner's eyes narrowed. Then we prepare. Garrett looked at the admiral, then at the council representatives. That's why we came back here first. He took a slow breath. I need all of you to understand something. The Fleet of Light survived because of courage, training we barely had, and luck we won't get twice. We lost people. Good people. Humans who were nurses, teachers, soldiers, miners, parents, pilots, mechanics, poets. They died protecting a galaxy that most of them had never seen properly. His voice grew heavier. At the worst moment of the battle, Rebecca was hit. Her ship broke apart. She was thrown into space. The room shifted. Rebecca glanced at him. Garrett. No, he said softly. They need to know. He looked back at the admiral. I stopped fighting. I left my ship and went after her. I thought I had lost her. I thought the one person who kept me human was gone. Rebecca's hand tightened around his. Garrett's eyes glowed faintly brighter. And something happened. The light responded. Not to anger alone. Not to power. Not to duty. It responded to love. The chamber was silent. Garrett looked around at the alien representatives, at the human officers, at every being who still believed power came from fleets, titles, weapons, or age. My love for Rebecca saved us, he said. Not because love is soft. Not because it makes us weak. Because love is the reason anyone stands between darkness and someone else. It is the reason a nurse runs into fire, a soldier holds a line, a parent shields a child, a friend refuses to leave another behind. Rebecca's expression softened, but she still managed to whisper. That was almost poetic. Garrett glanced at her. I've been practicing. Keep at it, she said as she smiled. A few humans in the room gave quiet, nervous laughs. Even Admiral Rayner's mouth twitched once. Then Garrett turned serious again. The fight is not over. It has only begun. The laughter died. The shadows will come again. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But they will. They will test our borders, whisper into our fears, turn species against each other, and wait for us to become divided. He looked at the council representatives. That is how they win. Not by being stronger than every civilization. By making sure every civilization stands alone. Rayner crossed his arms. And your recommendation? Garrett looked at Earth through the viewport, and then beyond it toward the stars. We stay vigilant. We stay united, humanity. The council. Every species willing to stand in the light. No more ladders. No more looking down on younger worlds. No more assuming old grudges matter more than survival. Rebecca stepped beside him and said, the shadows thrive when everyone believes they are alone. Garrett nodded. So we make sure no one is. For the first time in galactic memory, the oldest powers listened to humanity without condescension. Not because humans had climbed the ladder. Because humans had burned it away. Time passed. Not peacefully. Not completely. But it passed. The Fleet of Light became a permanent presence along the Milky Way's borders. Its surviving warriors recovered, trained, and learned what they were becoming. The forge moon at the galactic core remained awake, building new ships when new warriors were chosen. The great civilizations, shaken by the truth of the shadows, began sharing intelligence instead of hoarding it. Old accusations were re-examined. Missing ships were investigated properly. Border colonies received protection instead of suspicion. Humanity changed too. Earth no longer sat quietly at the bottom of the galactic ladder. It did not become an empire. It did not demand worship or submission. But when human delegates entered council chambers now, no one seated them in the outer galleries. The galaxy had seen what came from Earth. It had seen the light from human faces. Garrett and Rebecca did not become rulers. They refused every title that sounded too much like destiny. That irritated several governments, relieved several others, and amused Rebecca endlessly. "You could have been High Commander of Radiant Forces," she told Garrett one morning. They were back on Earth for the first time in months, in a quiet medical residence overlooking mountains that reminded Garrett of Alaska. Snow rested on the peaks in the distance. The air smelled cold and clean. Garrett sat beside her bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft white cloth. Their daughter slept in his arms. She was impossibly small. Too small, Garrett thought, for a universe so large. A faint golden shimmer moved beneath the baby's skin, barely visible, like sunlight under water. Garrett stared at her with open terror. Rebecca watched him from the pillows, exhausted and deeply entertained. "You look more scared now than you did facing the shadow Leviathan." "I understood the Leviathan." "You did not." She whispered, "I understood I should shoot it." "That is not the same thing." Garrett looked down at the sleeping infant. "She's so tiny." "Yes, Garrett. That's how babies work." "What if I hold her wrong?" "You have literally carried me through space while glowing like a small sun." "That was different." "How?" "You're less breakable." Rebecca gave him a look. He cleared his throat. "Emotionally." "I meant emotionally." "Good save." "Thank you." The baby stirred, making a small sound that nearly stopped Garrett's heart. He froze. Rebecca smiled. "You can breathe." "I am breathing." "No, you're not." Garrett carefully exhaled. Their daughter opened her eyes. For a moment they were not gold, not glowing. Just human eyes, new and unfocused, looking up at the man holding her. Garrett's expression broke into something softer than Rebecca had ever seen. "Hi," he whispered. Rebecca reached out and touched the baby's cheek. "What should we name her?" Garrett did not answer immediately. Outside the window, sunlight touched the mountain snow. "Dawn," he said. Rebecca looked at him. "Dawn Hale." He nodded. "Too obvious?" "Extremely." "You hate it." Rebecca watched their daughter yawn. "No," she said softly. "I love it." Garrett smiled. "Good. Because I was going to make a very persuasive argument." "Was it going to be as good as your proposal?" He winced. "Better than that." "Low bar," she said. He laughed quietly, careful not to wake Dawn. For a time there was warmth. There was family. There was Earth beneath them, alive and still turning. But beyond the Milky Way, the darkness remained. The fleet of light patrolled constantly now. 500 had become more. New warriors awakened across human space, and rarely, among other species touched by the light's growing reach. Ships of crystal and gold moved along the galactic rim, watching the void between galaxies. They found ruins there. Dead rocks. Old battle scars. Places where light behaved strangely. Places where sensors failed. And farther out, beyond the last patrol routes, beyond the last brave probes and radiant beacons, the true dark waited. One patrol followed a trail of impossible cold into the emptiness outside the Milky Way. Its sensors found nothing at first. Only silence. Only black. Then slowly something appeared, a shape. Not a ship exactly. Not a creature exactly. A vast shadow folded inside itself, drifting between galaxies like a wound that had learned patience. It was larger than any vessel. Larger than most stations. Its surface was not surface at all, but layered absence, rippling as though it dreamed of devouring stars. The patrol ship moved closer. Its light brightened and the shadow stirred. Then the light touched it. The thing recoiled. Across the void, through the spaces where sound should not exist, came a scream. Not pain alone. Recognition, fear. The shadow knew what had happened at the galactic edge. It knew the light had awakened. It knew humanity had survived. And it knew they were coming back. The scream stretched into the void, between galaxies calling forth the darkness.